The rain fell in sheets across Leadville, Colorado, turning the dirt streets to mud and washing away footprints almost as quickly as they formed. Lightning split the sky in violent bursts, illuminating the grand two-story house at the end of Chestnut Avenue in stark, unforgiving flashes. The Hargrove residence, normally a beacon of order and justice in the mining town, had fallen silent, save for the drumming of rain on its roof. Inside, 6-year-old Caroline Hargrove huddled beneath the staircase, her small body pressed against the wall, a wooden horse clutched to her chest. She had been reading in her father's study when she heard the first strange voice downstairs, unfamiliar, demanding. Then her mother's startled cry. Then silence. Caroline's fingers dug into the wooden horse, a birthday gift her father had carved for her 6th birthday 3 months ago. It had taken him weeks to get the details right. The flowing mane, the proud arch of the neck, the careful etching of muscles beneath imagined flesh. "A horse has spirit," he'd told her as he presented it. "Just like you, my brave girl." There was nothing brave about the way she trembled now, listening to heavy boots move methodically through their home. "Where is it, Judge?" The voice was cold, professional. "The documents and the ledger. Where are they?" Her father's voice, usually so confident in the courtroom, sounded strained. "I don't know what you're talking about, Lawrence. Don't play games. Morrison knows you have evidence. He knows you've been gathering it for months." A second voice, rougher. "Just tell us where it is, and this doesn't have to get messy." "Please," her mother's voice now terrified. "Our children are sleeping upstairs." Caroline held her breath. Thomas, her 3-year-old brother, was indeed sleeping, or had been, before this nightmare began. She had checked on him before going to her father's study, tucking his blanket around him the way her mother taught her. "You should have thought about your children before you started poking around in things that don't concern you." The first voice again, the one called Lawrence. "Morrison gave you every chance to look the other way." A scuffle, then the sound of someone falling. "Edwin!" Her mother's desperate cry. Caroline pressed her hands over her ears, but couldn't block the sound that followed a muffled pop that she would later recognize as a pistol fired through a pillow. Once, twice, 3 times. Silence fell again, broken only by the methodical opening of drawers and shuffling of papers. "Nothing here." The rough voice again. "Keep looking. It has to be somewhere. Check the study." Caroline's heart hammered against her ribs. The study where she had been reading not 5 minutes ago. Where she had left her shawl draped over her father's chair. Footsteps headed for the stairs. Caroline shrank further into the shadows beneath them. "Wait!" Lawrence's voice. "The girl, the judge's daughter. He dotes on her. Maybe he told her something. You think he'd tell a 6-year-old where he hid evidence of corruption? I think we need to be thorough. Morrison was clear, no witnesses." Caroline's blood turned to ice. She had to move. Now. As the men argued about where to search next, Caroline slipped from beneath the stairs and through the kitchen door that led to the garden. The rain struck her like tiny needles, instantly soaking her nightgown, but she didn't stop. She needed to get away to find help. "Caroline." She froze at her father's voice, barely audible over the rain. He lay on the garden path, blood spreading across his white shirt, despite his hand pressed against his side. How had he gotten here? Had he crawled from the parlor? "Papa!" She rushed to him, dropping to her knees beside his crumpled form. "Listen carefully." His voice was fading, each word an effort. "Remember the horse, Caroline. Find the mountain guardian." "I don't understand." Tears mixed with raindrops on her cheeks. He gripped her hand with surprising strength. "Blackwell, Bear Mountain, he'll protect you. His gaze flickered to the wooden horse still clutched in her other hand. The evidence is in the horse. Morrison must be stopped. Papa, please, don't. Run, Caroline. Don't let them find you. His fingers loosened. I love you, my brave girl. A shout from inside the house. Check the back! Caroline clutched the wooden horse to her chest and ran her father's final words burning into her memory. She ran until the grand house disappeared behind her, until the town's edges gave way to wilderness, until her legs could carry her no further. She ran toward Bear Mountain, though she didn't know it yet. The morning sun cast long shadows through the pines as Jack Blackwell stepped onto the rough-hewn porch of his cabin. At 45, weather and hardship had carved deep lines into his face, giving him the appearance of a man a decade older. His beard, once dark as midnight, now carried more gray than black, especially around his mouth, where years of pipe smoking had left their mark. He sipped his coffee, black and bitter, and surveyed his domain, the small clearing where his cabin stood, the woodpile stacked neatly against the north wall, the thin wisp of smoke rising from his chimney. Beyond that, nothing but wilderness for miles in every direction, just as he preferred it. 3 years had passed since Jack had chosen this isolated spot on Bear Mountain, far from Copper Falls or any other settlement where people might recognize him. 3 years of solitude broken only by monthly trips to Walter Montgomery's general store for supplies he couldn't hunt, grow, or make himself. 3 years of quiet that couldn't quite drown out the screams in his memory. Jack set his coffee mug on the porch railing and rubbed his temples. Last night's storm had brought the dreams again, vivid recollections of Thung Lung Do. Red Valley. The Ute settlement he had ordered, destroyed based on intelligence that it harbored raiders attacking white settlements. Intelligence that proved devastatingly wrong. He could still smell the smoke, hear the screams, see the bodies, men, women, children. The soldiers under his command had followed orders perfectly. Too perfectly. By the time Jack realized the weapons cache was nothing more than hunting tools, it was too late. An entire community wiped out on his command. The official report called it an unfortunate miscommunication of intelligence. Jack called it what it was, a massacre. He had resigned his commission the next day. A raven's harsh call pulled Jack back to the present. The bird perched on a nearby pine, regarding him with suspicious eyes. Jack raised his mug in a mock salute. "Morning to you, too," he muttered. The raven cocked its head, then launched itself into the sky with a flutter of glossy wings. Jack watched it go, envying its freedom. Even after 3 years, he remained a prisoner of his past. Inside the cabin, Jack moved to the loose floorboard beneath his bed, prying it up to reveal a small compartment. From it, he withdrew a leather-bound journal, its pages worn from frequent handling. Each day he wrote in it not about his present life, which hardly warranted recording, but about those who had died at Red Valley. He had tasked himself with remembering their names, documenting the little he knew about each victim, imagining the lives they might have led. It was his penance. Insufficient, but the only one he knew how to perform. Jack had just finished the day's entry when a sound froze him mid-motion, something shuffling through the underbrush outside. Too heavy for a rabbit, too deliberate for a deer. He reached for the Winchester rifle kept loaded beside the door, moving with the practiced quiet of a man who had learned that survival often depended on being the first to shoot. Pressing his back to the wall beside the window, Jack peered cautiously around the frame. The sight that met his eyes was so unexpected that for a moment he thought he might still be dreaming. A small child, a girl judging by the tattered blue dress, stumbled into the clearing. Her dark hair hung in wet tangles around her face, and she clutched something to her chest. Even from a distance, Jack could see she was exhausted, swaying on her feet. She made it 3 more steps before her legs gave out, and she crumpled to the ground. Jack hesitated only a moment before setting aside his rifle and rushing outside. Children didn't just appear in the wilderness, especially not 15 miles from the nearest town. Something was very wrong. He approached slowly, making enough noise that she would hear him coming if she were conscious. She didn't stir. Kneeling beside her, Jack gently turned her over, checking for injuries. No blood, but her skin was cool and clammy despite the warm morning. Exhaustion and exposure most likely. Her eyes fluttered open at his touch, deep brown, and filled with a wariness no child her age should possess. "Are you?" Her voice was a dry rasp. "Are you the mountain guardian?" The strange question caught Jack off guard. "I'm just Jack," he said. "What's your name?" Instead of answering, her gaze drifted past him to the cabin, then back to his face. She clutched something wooden, a toy horse Jack now saw tighter to her chest. "You live here, on the mountain." "I do." Jack studied her face, noting the quality of her dress beneath the dirt and tears. This was no poor miner's child. "Where are your folks?" Pain flashed across her features, quickly hidden behind a mask of caution that broke Jack's heart. He recognized that expression, had seen it on the faces of soldiers who'd witnessed too much horror to trust anything anymore. "I need to find the mountain guardian," she whispered, struggling to sit up. "Easy now." Jack placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're exhausted and probably hungry. Let's get you inside, get some food in you, and then we can figure things out." She studied him with those 2 old eyes, weighing her options with a calculation no child should need to make. Finally, she nodded once, clutching the wooden horse as Jack carefully lifted her. She weighed almost nothing, a fragile bundle of bones and determination. As he carried her toward the cabin, she sagged against him, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Inside, Jack laid her on his bed, covering her with his warmest blanket. He built up the fire, put water on to boil, and only then allowed himself to really think about what had just happened. A child alone in the wilderness had somehow found his isolated cabin. She'd asked for the mountain guardian, a title he'd never heard, and the way she had looked at him with that mixture of hope and suspicion. Jack ran a hand through his graying hair. Something was very wrong, and for the first time in 3 years, his peaceful isolation had been breached by the outside world. He glanced at the sleeping child, her small fingers still wrapped around the wooden horse, even in sleep. Whatever had driven her here had to be serious. Children didn't wander 15 miles through wilderness, especially not after a storm like last night's, unless something terrible was chasing them. As water heated on the stove, Jack moved to check on his unexpected guest. Her breathing had steadied, some color returning to her cheeks. The wooden horse in her arms was exquisitely carved. A father's work, Jack guessed, noting the detail in the flowing mane and the powerful lines of the body. Something about it tugged at his memory, but he couldn't place why. She stirred her eyes, opening suddenly with the alertness of someone used to danger. "It's all right," Jack said softly. "You're safe here." The girl sat up still, clutching the horse. "Who are you?" Her voice was stronger now, though still wary. "Name's Jackson Blackwell. Most people call me Jack." He kept his distance, not wanting to frighten her. "I've got some stew warming up if you're hungry." At the mention of food, the girl's composure cracked slightly, revealing the child beneath the watchful exterior. She nodded eagerly. "What should I call you?" Jack asked as he moved to the stove. The girl hesitated, then said, "I'm not supposed to tell my name, not until I find the mountain guardian." Jack ladled stew into a bowl, considering her words. That's fair enough, but I can't keep calling you girl. How about I call you horse after your toy there? A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Horse is a silly name. Then you choose. She thought for a moment, her small brow furrowing. Sarah. You can call me Sarah. Jack froze the ladle suspended over the pot. Sarah, his wife's name. The wife who had died of fever while he was away at war. It was just a coincidence, he told himself. Sarah was a common name. Sarah it is then, he managed, setting the bowl on the small table. Come eat, while it's hot. The girl Sarah slid from the bed, still holding the wooden horse. She approached the table cautiously, but once seated, she ate with surprising restraint, for a hungry child taking small, careful bites. This is good, she said after a few mouthfuls. Thank you. You're welcome. Jack sat across from her, keeping his movements slow and predictable. Now, I know you don't want to tell me your name, but can you tell me what you're doing out here? Bear Mountain is no place for a child alone. Sarah chewed thoughtfully, considering her answer. I'm looking for someone. My father told me to find him. Your father, where is he? Pain flickered across her face. Gone. They killed him. And Mama. And Thomas. Jack's blood ran cold. Who killed them, Sarah? Bad men. One had a star on his shirt. She looked up, her eyes suddenly bright with tears she refused to let fall. They came to our house. They wanted something Papa had hidden. Jack's mind raced. A lawman involved in murder. A judge or official with hidden information. A child sent to find someone on Bear Mountain. None of it made sense, and all of it suggested trouble. The kind of trouble Jack had carefully avoided for 3 years. When did this happen? He asked gently. Last night, during the storm. Her voice was flat now, emotionless in a way that spoke of shock. So recent. Whoever had killed her family might still be searching for her. How did you find my cabin? Sarah's fingers tightened around the wooden horse. Papa said to find Blackwell on Bear Mountain. Before he... Her voice faltered. Before he died. Jack felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath him. This child's father, whoever he was, had known Jack's name and location information very few people possessed. And he had sent his daughter here specifically with her last words. Who was your father, Sarah? The question came out more sharply than he intended. She shrunk back slightly. I'm not supposed to say. Not until I know you're the Mountain Guardian. Mountain Guardian again. The title meant nothing to Jack, but it clearly meant something to the girl and her late father. I don't know anything about being a guardian, Jack said honestly. I'm just a man who lives alone on a mountain because he prefers it that way. Sarah studied him, disappointment evident in her gaze. Then maybe you're not who Papa meant. Maybe not. Jack stood, moving to the stove to refill her bowl. But you're here now, and it's not safe for a child to wander these mountains alone. You can stay until we figure out where to take you. No, the sudden fear in her voice stopped him cold. I can't go to town. They'll find me. Who will find you? The bad men, the ones who killed my family. She clutched the wooden horse tighter. They said no witnesses. That means me. Jack returned to the table, setting the refilled bowl before her. No one will hurt you while you're with me, he said, the promise coming automatically. We'll figure this out together. Sarah relaxed slightly, returning to her meal with the same careful precision. Jack watched her, his mind working through possibilities, none of them good. If lawmen were involved in her family's murder, that complicated matters significantly. He couldn't simply take her to the sheriff in Copper Falls. As she ate, Jack checked her dress, noting the quality of the fabric beneath the dirt and tears. Expensive with fine stitching, the kind worn by the daughter of someone important. Checking the pockets, he found a folded piece of paper, soggy but legible. On it, written in a precise hand, Morrison knows. Find Blackwell on Bear Mountain. Evidence in the horse. Jack's pulse quickened. Evidence in the horse. He looked at the wooden toy Sarah clutched so carefully. Could there be a hidden compartment? And Morrison, could that be Samuel Morrison, the territorial governor? What could a child's father know that would interest the governor of Colorado Territory? Jack refolded the paper, slipping it into his own pocket without showing Sarah. He needed more information before confronting her with what he'd found. After the meal, exhaustion caught up with Sarah again. Jack made her a pallet near the fire, using his spare blankets to create a nest that a child might find comforting. She curled up there, still holding the wooden horse, and was asleep within minutes. Jack sat in his chair, watching the flames dance in the fireplace, turning over this strange situation. A murdered family. A child sent specifically to find him. Evidence hidden in a toy. And the name Morrison, a name with considerable power in Colorado Territory. Outside, the mountain settled into afternoon quiet, but Jack's mind was anything but peaceful. After years of isolation, trouble had found him again. The only question was what he intended to do about it. As night fell, Jack lit a lantern and watched Sarah sleep. In slumber, the wariness fell away from her face, revealing the child beneath, small, vulnerable, utterly dependent on him now. She reminded him painfully of another Sarah, of dreams they'd had of children, dreams ended by fever and war. "What am I supposed to do with you?" he whispered to the sleeping child. She didn't stir, her breathing deep and regular, one small hand still clutching the wooden horse. Jack moved closer, studying the toy in the lamplight. It was indeed remarkable craftsmanship, the wood smooth from handling, the details precise. A father's gift to a beloved daughter. Jack turned it carefully in the light, looking for anything unusual, any sign of a hidden compartment. The base seemed solid, though there might be a seam running along the belly. Without tools and better light, he couldn't be sure, and he wasn't about to take it from Sarah's grip. Looking out the window at the darkened forest, Jack made a decision. He would keep Sarah safe while he investigated who she was and what had happened to her family. If her father had sent her to him specifically, there must be a reason. And if there was evidence hidden in the wooden horse that someone was willing to kill for, he needed to understand what it was before deciding his next move. Tomorrow, he would begin teaching Sarah how to survive on the mountain, just in case they needed to leave quickly. Tonight, he would let her sleep protected for perhaps the first time since her family's murder. Jack returned to his chair and whispered to his long-dead wife, as he often did when alone. "You see, Sarah, another soul I probably can't save. But I'm going to try." The fire crackled in response, sending shadows dancing across the sleeping child's face. The next morning, Jack woke before dawn, his body still trained to the rhythms of a soldier, despite years of civilian life. Sarah slept on, curled tightly around her wooden horse. She had barely moved all night, sleeping with the stillness of complete exhaustion. Jack dressed quietly and stepped outside to begin his morning chores. The air was crisp with early autumn, the forest still dripping from yesterday's storm. As he chopped wood for the day's fire, his mind worked through the problem of his young guest. If her father had been murdered by someone with a badge, that complicated matters significantly. Jack couldn't simply take her to the authorities, but keeping a child on Bear Mountain indefinitely wasn't practical either, especially with winter approaching. He needed more information, and that meant a trip to Copper Falls sooner than his usual monthly supply run. When he returned to the cabin, Sarah was awake, sitting cross-legged on her pallet and watching the door with wary eyes that relaxed slightly when she saw him. "Thought you'd left," she said quietly. "Just doing chores." Jack set the armload of wood beside the fireplace. "Hungry?" She nodded, still clutching the wooden horse. As Jack prepared a simple breakfast of corn porridge, he studied Sarah in the morning light. Her dress, though of good quality, was torn and stained beyond repair. She would need new clothes, and soon. "After we eat," he said, setting a bowl before her, "I'm going to show you how things work around here." Sarah looked up, surprise evident on her small face. "You're letting me stay." "For now, until we figure out what to do next." Jack sat across from her. "But if you're staying, you need to know how to take care of yourself if I have to go out hunting or gathering supplies." Relief washed over her features. "I can help. Papa said I was a quick learner." "I'm sure you are." Jack watched her eat, noting how carefully she held her spoon, the manners of a well-raised child. "Sarah, I need to ask you something important." She looked up, instantly wary again. "The man who wore the star, the one who hurt your family, did you know him? Had you seen him before?" Sarah's grip on her spoon tightened. "Yes, he came to our house sometimes. Papa called him Marshal Lawrence, a federal marshal involved in murder." This was worse than Jack had imagined. "Did your papa tell you why he wanted you to find me specifically?" She hesitated, then said, "He called you the Mountain Guardian. He said you'd protect me and help stop the bad men." Jack frowned. "I've never been called that, and I don't know why your father would think I could help stop anyone." "You were a soldier," Sarah said matter-of-factly. "I can tell by how you move, how you always check the window before you walk past it." Sharp child, too observant by half. "Being a soldier doesn't make me a guardian," Jack said carefully. "It just makes me someone who's seen too much fighting." Sarah studied him with those two old eyes. "Papa said sometimes good people get used by bad people, but that doesn't make them bad." The words hit Jack like a physical blow. He thought of Red Valley, of following orders based on faulty intelligence, of being used. "Your papa sounds like a wise man," he managed. He was a... Sarah caught herself, remembered her secrecy. He was important. Jack decided not to press further. Trust would come with time, if at all. "Finish up your breakfast. We have work to do." The day passed in practical lessons. Jack showed Sarah how to tend the fire where he kept water and basic supplies, how to bar the door from the inside. He avoided any mention of the wooden horse or the evidence it might contain watching. Instead, how quickly she learned each task, storing away his observations. By evening, Sarah had relaxed enough to smile occasionally, though she still kept the wooden horse close at all times. As Jack prepared a simple supper, he made a decision. "I need to go to town tomorrow," he said casually. "We need supplies, and you need proper clothes." Fear flashed across Sarah's face. "I can't go to town. They might be looking for me." "You'll stay here," Jack assured her. "I'll show you where to hide if anyone comes while I'm gone." "But what if they find me?" Her voice trembled slightly. Jack knelt before her, meeting her gaze directly. "Sarah, I'm going to teach you how to stay safe, and I promise I'll come back as quickly as I can." She searched his face, looking for deception. Finding none, she nodded solemnly. "There's a space beneath the floorboards," Jack continued, moving to the corner of the cabin and lifting a concealed trapdoor. "If anyone comes, you hide in here, and don't come out until you hear my voice calling you. Understand?" Sarah peered into the dark space beneath the cabin, a root cellar Jack had dug his first year on the mountain. Yes. Good girl. That night, as Sarah slept by the fire, Jack examined the wooden horse more carefully, running his fingers along the seams in the lamplight. There was indeed a small compartment beneath the base, cleverly concealed, but detectable to careful inspection. He would need tools to open it without damaging the toy, and he wasn't willing to take it from Sarah while she slept. Whatever evidence her father had hidden, Jack decided could wait until he'd gathered more information in town. Something bigger than a child's safety was at stake. He sensed something that had cost a family their lives, and sent a 6-year-old girl fleeing through the wilderness with killers on her trail. Jack hadn't sought involvement in the affairs of Colorado Territory since his resignation. He'd turned his back on a world that had used his skills for destruction, chosen isolation as his penance. Now that world had found him again in the form of a small girl with ancient eyes. "Mountain Guardian," he murmured to himself as he banked the fire. A title he'd never heard, a role he'd never sought. Yet something about it resonated, as if it named a path he'd been avoiding, but always known he might have to walk. Tomorrow would bring answers, perhaps. Tonight brought only questions and the soft sound of a child's breathing in a cabin that had been silent far too long. The journey to Copper Falls took most of the morning. Jack hadn't traveled this trail in nearly a month, and fallen branches from the recent storm made progress slower than usual. He'd left Sarah with clear instructions: stay inside, keep the door barred, hide in the root cellar if anyone approached. "I'll be back before dark," he'd promised, tucking an extra blanket around her shoulders. "If I'm not, there's food in the pantry and water in the bucket." She'd nodded solemnly, the wooden horse clutched to her chest, her eyes following him as he walked away from the cabin. The trust in that gaze weighed on him, a responsibility he hadn't sought but couldn't deny. Copper Falls had changed little since Jack's last visit. A collection of rough buildings clustered along a single main street, dominated by Montgomery's General Store at one end and the Silver Dollar Saloon at the other. In between sat Jameson's blacksmith widow Chen's laundry, and a dozen other establishments serving the miners and ranchers of the region. Jack tied his mule outside Montgomery's and stepped onto the wooden sidewalk, adjusting his hat low over his eyes. In 3 years, he'd perfected the art of being unmemorable, speaking only when necessary, avoiding eye contact, entering and leaving town with minimal interaction. The bell above the door jingled as he entered the store. Walter Montgomery looked up from his ledger, offering the same polite nod he'd given Jack every month for 3 years. "Blackwell, little early for your usual run, isn't it?" Jack shrugged. "Storm damaged some things. Need to replace them." Montgomery didn't press, turning back to his ledger as Jack gathered his supplies: flour, coffee, salt, some fabric that might be fashioned into clothing for Sarah, and after a moment's consideration, a small bag of hard candy. A child deserved some sweetness in her life. As Jack shopped, the door opened again, admitting Sheriff Thomas Parker, Copper Falls law enforcement, since before Jack had arrived in the region. Parker nodded to Montgomery, then noticed Jack in the back of the store. "Blackwell, don't usually see you this time of month." Jack returned the nod without elaboration. Parker wasn't a bad sort. Efficient, fair-handed, from what Jack had observed during his limited interactions, but any badge made Jack cautious these days, especially with Sarah's story fresh in his mind. "Storm damage," Montgomery explained when Jack didn't respond. "Lot of folks coming in for repairs." Parker grunted agreement, then moved to the store's bulletin board, where notices and wanted posters were tacked haphazardly. He pinned a new sheet to the center, stepping back to ensure it was secure. "Just got this from Leadville," he said to Montgomery. "Terrible business." Jack continued his shopping, keeping his head down, but his ears open. "Judge and his whole family?" Montgomery asked, moving to examine the notice. Almost. Judge Hargrove, his wife, and their boy. Daughters missing, either taken or ran off during the attack. Jack's hand froze on a bolt of fabric. Judge Hargrove. A murdered judge. A missing daughter. Sarah's words echoed in his mind. They killed Papa and Mama. And Thomas. Any idea who did it? Montgomery was asking. Official line is it was the Maddox gang, Parker said. But word from my counterpart in Leadville is they're looking at more personal motives. Hargrove was investigating corruption in the territorial government, had made some powerful enemies. Jack forced himself to continue selecting items, keeping his movements casual while his mind raced. He needed to see that notice, but couldn't show obvious interest. Reward for information on the girl, Montgomery asked. $500, Parker confirmed. She's the only witness, if she's still alive. What's her name? Montgomery had moved back behind his counter, tallying Jack's purchases. Caroline Hargrove, 6 years old, dark hair, brown eyes, last seen wearing a blue dress. Every detail matched Sarah, no Caroline. The girl who had appeared at his cabin, exhausted and terrified, clutching a wooden horse that contained hidden evidence. Poor thing, Montgomery said, shaking his head. Lot of dangerous country between Leadville and anywhere else. Mountain lions, bears, exposure. That'll be it, Jack interrupted, setting his selections on the counter with carefully controlled hands. He needed to get out of this store, away from the sheriff's observant eyes, back to the cabin, where Caroline waited alone and vulnerable. As Montgomery totaled his purchases, Jack risked a glance at the notice on the bulletin board. The sketch showed a young girl with solemn eyes and dark hair, unmistakably the child now hiding in his cabin. Below the image, missing Caroline Hargrove, daughter of Judge Edwin Hargrove, $500 reward. And beside it, another notice, murdered Judge Edwin Hargrove and family. Suspected perpetrators, Maddox gang. Reward for information leading to arrest. But if Sheriff Parker was right, the Maddox gang was just a convenient scapegoat. Caroline had said a man with a badge, Marshal Lawrence, had been involved. That suggested corruption reaching into federal law enforcement, exactly the kind of thing a crusading judge might investigate. Something wrong, Blackwell. Montgomery's voice pulled Jack back to the present. No, just wondering if I forgot anything. Jack paid for his supplies, keeping his face impassive. As Montgomery wrapped the purchases, Sheriff Parker approached the counter. Staying out of trouble up on that mountain of yours? Always do, Jack replied. Seen any strangers passing through? We've had reports of unusual activity around Bear Mountain. Riders who don't match the description of any locals. Jack's pulse quickened. Someone was searching the area, searching for Caroline most likely. Haven't seen anyone, he said truthfully. Caroline had found his cabin on her own, and he hadn't encountered any pursuers. Well, keep your eyes open, Parker said. And if you do see anything suspicious, you come straight to me. Understand? The warning was clear. Parker suspected something, though, whether it was related to Caroline or something else Jack couldn't tell. Understood? Jack said, gathering his supplies. Good day, gentlemen. Outside, Jack loaded his purchases onto his mule with practiced efficiency, his mind working through this new information. Caroline Hargrove, daughter of Judge Edwin Hargrove of Leadville. A judge investigating corruption murdered along with his family. A child sent specifically to find Jack carrying evidence hidden in a toy. And now, riders searching Bear Mountain. Jack mounted his mule and headed back toward the trail home, keenly aware that time was running out. He needed to open the hidden compartment in the wooden horse, understand what evidence Judge Hargrove had concealed there, and decide what to do with Caroline and with himself. The title, Mountain Guardian, echoed in his mind. Not a title he'd ever claimed, but perhaps one Judge Hargrove had bestowed upon him for reasons Jack couldn't fathom. Whatever the reason, a child waited for his return, her safety dependent on decisions he would make in the coming hours. As he rode, Jack felt eyes on him, whether real or imagined he couldn't tell. But the wilderness no longer felt like the sanctuary it had been for 3 years. Now it was just another battlefield, with an innocent life hanging in the balance. Caroline sat cross-legged on the cabin floor, carefully arranging a circle of small stones she'd collected from beneath Jack's bed. Each stone represented a memory, her mother's gentle hands braiding her hair, Thomas's delighted laugh when she made shadow puppets on the wall, her father's steady voice reading stories before bedtime. She would not forget them. She would remember everything. The wooden horse lay beside her, its carved eyes seeming to watch her work with patient understanding. Papa had made it for her birthday, spending weeks getting every detail perfect. "A horse has spirit," he'd told her. "Just like you, my brave girl." She didn't feel brave now, alone in a stranger's cabin, waiting for his return. But Papa had sent her to find Blackwell, the mountain guardian, and she had succeeded. That had to count for something. A sound outside the cabin froze Caroline mid-motion. Footsteps. She strained to listen, remembering Jack's instructions: if anyone approached, hide in the root cellar, and don't come out until he called for her. Gathering the wooden horse, Caroline moved silently to the hidden trapdoor, lifting it carefully to avoid any noise. She had just lowered herself into the dark space when the cabin door rattled, someone testing the bar Jack had shown her how to secure. Voices outside, muffled but distinct. "Locked. Maybe he's not home. Check around back. Lawrence said the girl might be here." Caroline's blood turned to ice. Lawrence. The marshal who had killed her family. They had tracked her to Bear Mountain already. She pulled the trapdoor closed above her, descending into complete darkness as footsteps circled the cabin. The root cellar smelled of earth and potatoes, cool and damp against her skin. Caroline hugged the wooden horse to her chest, trying to control her breathing as Jack had taught her. "In and out nice and slow," he'd said. "Like you're trying to keep a candle flame from flickering." Above ground, she heard the crash of breaking glass, a window being forced. Then boots on the wooden floor, heavy and purposeful. "Someone's living here, all right," a voice said. "But no sign of a girl." "Look around. Check under the bed in the cupboards. She's small, could hide anywhere." Caroline held her breath as footsteps moved directly overhead. Would they find the trapdoor Jack had shown her how it was designed to blend with the surrounding floorboards? But would it fool professional searchers? "Nothing in here but an old man's things," the first voice reported. "Clothes, hunting gear, some books. Lawrence is convinced she's on this mountain. Said the judge sent her to find someone called the Mountain Guardian." A snort of derision. "Sounds like a fairy tale to me. Girl's probably dead in the woods somewhere. Mountain lion got her." "Well, we need to be sure. Morrison's paying good money." Morrison. Caroline knew that name. Papa had mentioned it often in the weeks before his death, always in hushed conversations with Mama after they thought she was asleep. "Morrison is dangerous," he'd said once. "If he discovers what I've found, we'll all be at risk." The men continued searching the cabin, their movements growing more frustrated as they found nothing. Finally, the first voice spoke again. "Let's check the barn. Maybe she's hiding with the animals." The footsteps receded, the cabin door opening and closing. Caroline remained frozen in her hiding place, counting slowly to 100 as Jack had instructed. "Even after you think they're gone," he'd told her, "count to 100. Bad men sometimes pretend to leave, then wait to catch you coming out of hiding." When she reached 100, Caroline still didn't move, listening intently for any sound above. Only silence greeted her. The men had gone for now, but they would be back. They knew about the mountain guardian. They knew she was on Bear Mountain. And they mentioned Morrison, the man her father had been investigating, the man behind her family's murder. Caroline clutched the wooden horse tighter. Inside it lay the evidence Papa had gathered, evidence he'd died protecting. Evidence she had to get to safety. She didn't know how long she remained in the dark, fear keeping her motionless long after the danger had passed. Only when she heard Jack's familiar voice calling her name did she finally push open the trapdoor and emerge blinking in the late afternoon light. Jack stood in the center of the cabin, his face grim as he surveyed the damaged broken window, overturned furniture, contents of drawers dumped onto the floor. "Caroline," he said, and the use of her real name made her freeze. "You know," it wasn't a question. "I know your name is Caroline Hargrove. I know your father was Judge Edwin Hargrove of Leadville." Jack knelt to her level, his voice gentle. "I know what happened to your family." Tears she had refused to shed since that night suddenly welled in Caroline's eyes, spilling down her cheeks in hot streams. For the first time since fleeing Leadville, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her grief. The careful wall of composure she'd built crumbled in an instant. Jack's weathered hand reached for hers, engulfing her small fingers in his calloused grip. "I'm so sorry, Caroline. Men came here while you were gone," she said, wiping at her tears with her free hand. "They looked for me, but they didn't find the hiding place." Jack's expression darkened. "Did you hear what they said?" "They mentioned Lawrence the marshal who killed my family. And Morrison. Papa was investigating him." She looked up into Jack's face. "They knew about the mountain guardian. They're looking for us both." Jack absorbed this information, his jaw tightening. "Caroline, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to tell me the truth. Did your father tell you why he sent you to find me specifically? Did he tell you why he called me the mountain guardian?" Caroline shook her head. "He just said to find Blackwell on Bear Mountain, that you would protect me and help stop the bad men. He said—" She hesitated. What else did he say?" "He said the evidence is in the horse, that Morrison must be stopped." Jack's gaze dropped to the wooden toy still clutched in her arms. "May I see it?" Caroline hesitated only a moment before handing over her most precious possession. Jack turned it carefully in his hands, fingers probing along the base until he found the hidden seam. "There's a compartment here," he said. "Your father hid something inside. Can you open it?" Jack nodded, moving to his workbench for a thin knife. With careful precision, he worked the blade along the seam until the base of the horse popped free, revealing a small cavity within. Inside lay a folded piece of paper and a small silver key. Caroline watched as Jack extracted the items, handling them with reverent care. The paper, when unfolded, revealed a set of coordinates written in her father's precise hand, followed by the phrase, "Angel watches over evidence." The key was small and ornate, the kind used for a jewelry box or small safe. "Do you know what these mean?" Jack asked, showing her the coordinates. Caroline shook her head. "But Angel might mean the rock formation in Wildcat Canyon. Papa took me there once. He said it looked like an angel with outstretched wings." Jack studied the coordinates again. "This location is about 2 days' ride from here, near where Wildcat Creek meets the Eagle River." "Are we going there?" Caroline asked. Jack's gaze moved to the broken window, then back to Caroline. "We don't have much choice. The men who came here will return probably with reinforcements. And they know we have evidence of something that Morrison presumably Governor Samuel Morrison, once kept hidden. Governor Morrison. Caroline's eyes widened. The man who visits Denver and wears fancy clothes. The same. Jack carefully refolded the paper, tucking it and the key into his shirt pocket. Your father was investigating him, and it got him killed. Now those same men are hunting you, and they've found my mountain. Caroline absorbed this information with the same grave focus she brought to all revelations. So we have to leave. Yes, tonight. Jack began gathering supplies, his movements quick but methodical. Pack only what you can carry. We'll travel light and fast. As Caroline helped prepare for their departure, Jack fitted the base back onto the wooden horse, securing it with a drop of glue from his workbench. Why fix it? Caroline asked. We already took out the evidence. Jack handed the horse back to her. Because it matters to you, and because if we're captured, I want them to think the evidence is still inside. It might buy us time. Caroline clutched the repaired toy, a sudden wave of grief washing over her. It was the last thing her father had made for her, the last connection to a life now shattered beyond repair. He knew they would kill him, she whispered. Papa knew, and he prepared everything so I could find you. Jack paused in his preparations, his face softening as he looked at the small girl standing amid the wreckage of his cabin, clutching a wooden horse and bearing a burden no child should carry. Your father was a brave man, he said quietly. And so are you, Caroline Hargrove. She lifted her chin, eyes shining with unshed tears. Will you really help me stop them, like Papa said you would? Jack thought of Red Valley, of the lives lost due to his actions, of 3 years spent in isolation writing names in a journal that could never absolve him, of a child who had crossed 15 miles of wilderness alone, bearing evidence that might bring justice to those who deserved it. Yes, he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. I will help you. I promise. Outside, the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows through the pines. Soon, darkness would provide cover for their escape from Bear Mountain, a place that had been Jack's sanctuary, but would never be so again. The mountain guardian, Judge Hargrove, had called him. A title Jack had never sought, a role he'd never imagined. Yet, as he prepared to lead Caroline into the wilderness with killers on their trail, Jack found himself accepting the mantle, if only for the sake of a brave girl with ancient eyes and a wooden horse. They left the cabin as darkness fell, traveling by moonlight through the dense pine forest. Jack led the way, Caroline following on the small mountain pony he kept for hunting trips. They moved in silence, Jack pausing occasionally to listen for pursuers, though the forest remained quiet, save for the natural sounds of night creatures. Caroline sat straight in the saddle, the wooden horse secured in a satchel at her side. She hadn't complained once, not about the cold night air, or the frightening shadows that seemed to shift and move around them. Jack glanced back at her, occasionally marveling at the resilience of this child who had lost everything yet pressed forward with such determination. We'll stop at first light, Jack said quietly, as they crossed a small stream. Rest the horses, get some food in us. Caroline nodded, her face serious in the moonlight. Will they follow us? Probably. Jack saw no point in lying to her. But we have a head start, and I know these mountains better than most. Better than Marshal Lawrence. Jack considered this. Lawrence is from the east, if I recall correctly. Not a mountain man, but he'll have trackers with him, men who know wilderness? Like Montgomery. Jack turned in his saddle, surprised. What do you know about Montgomery? Caroline's small face remained impassive. He came to our house once. He and Papa argued. I listened from the stairs. Montgomery said Papa was poking into things that don't concern him. Papa said Montgomery was as corrupt as his brother. Jack processed this information. Walter Montgomery, the storekeeper in Copper Falls, had visited Judge Hargrove in Leadville. They had argued about the judge's investigations, and Montgomery had a brother. Samuel Morrison is Walter Montgomery's brother, Jack realized aloud. Caroline nodded. They're brothers. Papa said Mr. Morrison changed his name to sound more important. She wrinkled her nose. Montgomery doesn't sound like a governor name. The pieces clicked into place for Jack. The territorial governor and the storekeeper in Copper Falls brothers working together to conceal whatever corruption Judge Hargrove had been investigating. That meant Montgomery had been watching him for 3 years, reporting his movements to his powerful brother. That's why your father knew where to send you, Jack said. Montgomery must have mentioned me to your father during their argument. Papa said to find the mountain guardian on Bear Mountain, Caroline confirmed. He said you were a good man who had been used by bad ones. Jack's blood ran cold. Judge Hargrove had known specifically about his past, about Red Valley. But how that information had been buried in military reports, the official story claiming a successful operation against hostile forces. Did your father say anything else about me? Caroline hesitated. He said you carry guilt that isn't yours to bear, that you were lied to just like he was. Jack fell silent, absorbing these words. Judge Hargrove had been investigating corruption in the territorial government, and somehow that investigation had led to Red Valley to the massacre Jack had ordered, based on intelligence that proved catastrophically wrong. Could Morrison have been involved? The territorial governor would have had access to military intelligence, could have influenced reports, manipulated information to serve his purposes. Your father was a very perceptive man, Jack finally said, guiding his horse around a fallen tree. And a brave one. The bravest, Caroline agreed, her voice small but fierce in the darkness. They rode on through the night, following game trails and old hunting paths that wouldn't appear on any map. By the time dawn painted the eastern sky with pale light, they had covered nearly 15 miles of difficult terrain. Jack found a sheltered hollow beside a small creek, well hidden from any trail, and they made camp. As Caroline helped gather firewood, Jack noticed her checking her satchel repeatedly, ensuring the wooden horse remained safe. We'll need to be careful with fire, Jack said as he arranged stones for a small cooking pit. Smoke can be seen for miles in clear weather. I know, Caroline said, surprising him again with her practicality. Papa taught me about camping. He said knowledge was the best protection. Your papa was right. Jack produced jerky and hardtack from his supplies. It's not much of a breakfast, but it'll keep us going. As they ate, Jack studied the coordinates they'd found in the wooden horse. If his calculations were correct, they were heading for a location near the Eagle River, about 30 miles southwest of their current position. 2 days hard riding if they pushed the horses. Caroline, he said carefully, do you know what kind of evidence your father was gathering against Governor Morrison? She chewed thoughtfully on her jerky. Papers, records of money, maps with markings on them. Her brow furrowed with the effort of remembering. And something about Valley Red. Red Valley, Jack corrected automatically, his pulse quickening. Your father had information about Red Valley. Caroline nodded. He kept it in his safe behind his law books. He didn't know I watched him sometimes when he thought I was sleeping. And this evidence is that what we'll find at the coordinates at Angel Rock. I think so. Caroline looked down at her hands. Papa said if anything happened to him, the angel would protect the truth until someone brave enough came to find it. Jack fell silent, contemplating the implications. Judge Hargrove had been gathering evidence of corruption that somehow tied back to Red Valley. He'd hidden that evidence then sent his daughter to find the one man who might understand its significance. Jack Blackwell, the officer who had ordered the attack based on false intelligence. The Mountain Guardian. Not a title Jack had ever sought, but one Judge Hargrove had bestowed on him, believing Jack would protect both his daughter and the truth he had died uncovering. "We should rest," Jack said finally. "A few hours' sleep, then we move on. We need to reach those coordinates before Lawrence and his men figure out where we're headed." Caroline nodded, curling up on the blanket Jack provided. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened into sleep, one hand still resting protectively on her satchel. Jack watched her sleep, this child, who carried both the evidence of corruption and the weight of her family's murder. She trusted him implicitly, based solely on her father's word that he would protect her. The responsibility settled on his shoulders like a physical weight. For 3 years, Jack had avoided responsibility, avoided connection, avoided the world and its complexities. Now, watching over Caroline as she slept beneath the pines, he realized that isolation had never been the answer. It had merely been a way of hiding from truths he hadn't been ready to face. They rode hard through the day, stopping only to rest the horses and take brief meals. Caroline never complained, though Jack could see the exhaustion in her small frame as the hours passed. She sat straight in the saddle, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, alert for danger in a way no 6-year-old should need to be. By late afternoon, they had crossed into unfamiliar territory, at least for Jack, who rarely ventured this far from his cabin on Bear Mountain. The landscape grew more rugged with steep ravines and rocky outcroppings that slowed their progress. "We'll need to find shelter for the night soon," Jack said as the sun began its descent. "This isn't safe country to travel in darkness." Caroline pointed to a ridge ahead. "What about up there? Papa said high ground is safer for camping because you can see who's coming." "Your papa taught you well." Jack studied the ridge. "It's defensible with good sight lines. Let's go." They made camp in a small clearing atop the ridge with views that stretched for miles in every direction. As Jack prepared a cold supper, they'd decided against a fire. Despite the autumn chill, Caroline suddenly froze, her gaze fixed on something in the distance. "Riders," she whispered. "Coming from the east." Jack followed her gaze, spotting the small dust cloud that marked mounted men moving at speed. Too far to identify, but the timing was suspicious. Lawrence and his men most likely following their trail from the cabin. "Good eyes," Jack praised, pulling out his spyglass. Through it, he could make out 4 riders still several miles away, but moving purposefully in their general direction. 4 of them, still too far to see who. "Will they find us?" Caroline's voice remained steady, but Jack could see the fear in her eyes. "Not if we're careful." Jack calculated distances and terrain. "They're still following our old trail. By the time they reach where we turned off, it'll be dark. We're safe here for the night, but we'll need to move at first light." Caroline nodded, her small shoulders relaxing slightly. She reached into her satchel, drawing out the wooden horse and holding it against her chest like a talisman. As they ate their simple meal, Jack studied Caroline's face in the fading light. Despite her composure, the events of the past days had taken their toll. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her cheeks had hollowed slightly from stress and irregular meals. "Caroline," he said gently, "you've been very brave through all of this, braver than many grown men I've known." She looked up, surprise flickering across her features. "I'm not brave. I'm scared all the time." "Being brave doesn't mean not being scared," Jack told her. "It means doing what needs to be done despite being scared. And you've done that every step of the way." Caroline considered this, turning the wooden horse in her small hands. Papa said something similar once. When I asked why he kept investigating bad men, even though Mama worried about it. What did he say? He said courage isn't the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something is more important than fear. Her voice took on the formal cadence of recitation, carefully preserved words from a beloved parent. Jack nodded, impressed, both by the wisdom and by Caroline's perfect recall. Your father sounds like a remarkable man. I wish I could have met him. He wanted to meet you, Caroline said quietly. He said you deserved to know the truth about Red Valley. Jack's hand stilled on his canteen. And what truth is that, Caroline? She frowned, concentrating. Papa said bad men told you fibs. Her small brow furrowed as she tried to remember the exact words. They wanted you to attack those people, so they made up stories about them being dangerous. The words hit Jack like a physical blow. He had suspected as much for years, but hearing it confirmed even in a child's simple terms sent a wave of nausea through him. All those lives, all that destruction. Not an accident, not a miscommunication, but a deliberate manipulation. Did your father say who wanted the village destroyed? Caroline shook her head. I don't think he knew for sure, but it was part of what he was investigating when... Her voice faltered. When they killed him, Jack finished quietly. Caroline nodded, clutching the wooden horse tighter. He said everything was connected. The money, the land, Red Valley Governor Morrison. He said once he had all the pieces, he would make sure everyone knew the truth. Jack gazed out at the darkening landscape where the dust cloud of their pursuers had vanished with the setting sun. Judge Hargrove had been killed to prevent that truth from coming to light. And now Jack and Caroline were the only ones who might complete what the judge had started. We'll find the evidence your father hid, Jack promised, and we'll make sure everyone knows the truth, just like he wanted. Caroline studied his face, searching for certainty. They'll try to kill us too, like they killed Papa and Mama and Thomas. I know. Jack met her gaze directly. But I won't let them hurt you, Caroline. Not while I'm alive. She nodded once, accepting his promise with the solemn trust of a child who had no choice but to believe. As darkness claimed the mountains, Jack kept watch while Caroline slept, the wooden horse still clutched in her arms. Below them, somewhere in the vast wilderness, 4 riders continued their pursuit, hunting a man and a child who carried evidence that could destroy the powerful. Jack checked his Winchester, ensuring it was clean and loaded. He had avoided violence for 3 years, seeking penance through isolation rather than action. Now, watching Caroline's small form huddled beneath his spare blanket, he acknowledged what he had been avoiding. Some sins could only be redeemed through confronting them directly. Some wrongs could only be righted by facing those responsible. If Morrison and his brother had engineered the massacre at Red Valley, if they had used Jack as their instrument for slaughter, then his true penance lay not in hiding from the world, but in exposing their crimes and bringing them to justice. The mountain guardian, Judge Hargrove, had called him. Perhaps it was time to earn that title. They broke camp before dawn, moving southwest toward the coordinates hidden in the wooden horse. The terrain grew increasingly difficult, narrow ridges, steep ravines, dense forest that required careful navigation. By mid-morning, they had reached a high plateau that offered views of the Eagle River Valley stretching below them. There, Jack said, pointing to a distinctive rock formation near where Wildcat Creek emptied into the larger river. That must be Angel Rock. It does look like wings outstretched. Caroline studied the formation, nodding agreement. That's where Papa took me. He said it was a special place, a guardian of secrets. Jack consulted his compass, calculating the remaining distance. We can reach it by midday if we push hard. What about the men following us? Jack had been monitoring their back trail all morning, watching for signs of pursuit. No sign of them yet, but they're out there. We need to keep moving. They descended from the plateau via a treacherous game trail that wound between boulders and along narrow ledges. Jack led Caroline's pony, ensuring the animal's footing remained secure on the difficult path. By the time they reached the valley floor, the sun had climbed high overhead, casting short shadows on the rocky ground. "We're close now," Jack said, helping Caroline dismount beside a small stream. "Let the horses drink. We'll continue on foot from here, less visible that way." As the animals drank, Jack studied their surroundings with a soldier's eye. The valley was narrow here, with steep walls rising on either side. Angel Rock loomed ahead, its distinctive shape unmistakable, a natural stone formation that indeed resembled an angel with outstretched wings carved by millennia of wind and water. "What exactly are we looking for?" Jack asked as they approached the formation on foot, leading the horses behind them. Caroline frowned in concentration. "Papa never said exactly, just that the angel watches over the evidence." Jack examined the rock formation more closely as they drew near. The angel stood perhaps 30 feet tall, its wings formed by two slabs of granite that extended from a central column. At its base, tumbled boulders created natural alcoves and shadows. "Could be a cave," Jack mused, circling the formation. "Or some kind of natural hollow beneath the rock." Caroline released her pony's reins and moved closer to the formation, studying it with an intensity that reminded Jack forcefully of her father. Her small fingers traced patterns in the stone, feeling for irregularities or markers that might guide them. "Here," she said, suddenly stopping at the base of the right wing. "Look at these marks." Jack knelt beside her, examining the stone where she pointed. Almost invisible, unless you knew to look for them, 3 small notches carved deliberately into the rock, forming a triangle. "Good eyes," he said, genuinely impressed. "This isn't natural. Someone made these marks." Caroline beamed briefly at his praise, then resumed her serious expression. "What do they mean?" Jack ran his fingers over the notches. "Could be a marker for a cache or hiding place." And he examined the surrounding stone, looking for seams or gaps that might indicate a concealed entrance. "Try the key," Caroline suggested, pulling her satchel around to retrieve the small silver key they'd found inside the wooden horse. Jack took the key, studying it thoughtfully. It seemed too delicate for any kind of outdoor lock exposed to elements. "I don't see any—" He stopped abruptly as his fingers detected a small circular depression in the stone, almost perfectly hidden within the natural patterns of the rock. "Wait, there's something here." He cleared away lichen and dust from the depression, revealing what appeared to be a keyhole cut into the stone itself. Jack inserted the silver key carefully, half expecting it not to fit, but it slid in perfectly. When he turned it, a soft click echoed from within the rock. A section of stone beside the keyhole shifted slightly, revealing the edge of what appeared to be a door, built seamlessly into the rock face. "Your father was thorough," Jack said with newfound respect as he pushed against the hidden door. It swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a small cave beyond. Caroline's eyes widened. "A secret room." "Stay behind me," Jack cautioned, drawing his revolver before entering. The cave extended perhaps 15 feet into the rock, its walls smooth and clearly shaped by human hands rather than nature. At its center stood a small metal safe bolted to the stone floor. "This has to be it," Jack said, holstering his weapon and examining the safe. It bore no manufacturer's mark, but the keyhole matched the silver key they still had. "Your father planned everything meticulously." Caroline stood in the entrance, clutching her wooden horse, her expression a mixture of awe and sadness. He knew they might kill him. He prepared all this because he knew. Jack nodded grimly as he inserted the key into the safe. He was ensuring the truth would survive even if he didn't. The lock turned smoothly, and the safe door swung open. Inside lay several oilskin packages carefully wrapped and labeled in a precise hand. Jack removed them one by one, setting them on the cave floor. Military Reports, Red Valley Operation, read the first package. Financial Transactions, Morrison, Montgomery Enterprises, read another. Land Acquisitions, Ute Territory, said a third. And finally, Witness Statements, Red Valley Survivors. Survivors. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he untied the fourth package. There had been survivors from Red Valley. The official report had stated total casualties, no survivors. Another lie. He opened the package carefully, revealing several sworn statements, each bearing a notary's seal. The top document bore the signature of Joseph Standing Elk, identified as a Ute elder, who had been away from the village during the attack. Morrison ordered the attack, read the first line of testimony. He needed our people eliminated to gain control of the southern pass. Major Blackwell was given false reports claiming our village harbored raiders. I have testified to Judge Hargrove that Morrison personally visited our village 2 days before the attack, demanding we leave lands that had been guaranteed to us by treaty. Jack sat back on his heels, a roaring in his ears, drowning out all other sound. Morrison had visited the village personally, had threatened them, had then engineered their destruction, using Jack as his unwitting instrument. "Jack!" Caroline's voice pulled him back to the present. She stood beside him now, her small face concerned. "Are you all right?" "No," he answered honestly. "But I will be." He indicated the documents spread before them. "Your father found the truth, Caroline. About Red Valley, about Morrison's corruption, about all of it. This is what they killed him to conceal." Caroline knelt beside the documents, her expression grave beyond her years. "Will this be enough to make people believe us?" "With these documents, yes." Jack carefully rewrapped the packages. "These contain sworn testimony, financial records, military reports, everything needed to prove corruption at the highest levels of territorial government." "And to clear your name," Caroline added quietly. "To show you were lied to about Red Valley." Jack paused in his work, surprised by her perception. "That's secondary. The important thing is justice for your family and for the people of Red Valley. Papa would say justice for everyone matters." Caroline's tone held the certainty of one repeating a fundamental truth learned at a beloved parent's knee. Before Jack could respond, a sound froze them both, the distant but unmistakable crack of a rifle shot, followed by the whinny of frightened horses. "They've found us," Jack said quickly, gathering the document packages and stuffing them into his saddlebags. "We need to move now." Caroline was already at the cave entrance, peering cautiously outside. "I see them. 4 riders coming up the valley." Jack joined her, surveying the situation with a soldier's eye. Lawrence and his men had found their trail and followed it to Angel Rock. They were still at a distance, perhaps half a mile away, but closing fast. "Back inside," Jack ordered, pulling Caroline away from the entrance. "We need to think." They couldn't outrun mounted men, not with their own horses, likely scattered by the gunfire. The cave offered temporary shelter, but also a trap. Once Lawrence discovered the hidden door, they would be cornered with no escape. "Is there another way out of this cave?" Jack asked, examining the walls for any sign of a second passage. Caroline shook her head. "I don't think so." Jack made a quick decision. "Take the documents. Hide in the back of the cave. I'm going to draw them away from here." "No." Caroline clutched his arm. "They'll kill you." "They'll try," Jack said grimly. But I know these mountains, and I'm not easy to kill. This is our best chance, Caroline. I'll lead them away, and when it's clear you take the evidence and follow Wildcat Creek upstream. It will lead you to a trapper's cabin about 5 miles from here. Wait for me there." "What if you don't come?" Her voice was small but steady. Jack knelt to meet her gaze directly. "Then follow the creek to its source, cross the ridge to the east, and you'll reach the Denver Road in 2 days. From there, find a man named Samuel Hayes at the Denver Post newspaper. Give him these documents. He'll know what to do with them." Caroline's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded resolutely. "I can do it. But please, come back." "I'll do my best." Jack handed her the saddlebags containing the precious documents. "Now to the back of the cave. Don't come out until you're certain they're gone." As Caroline retreated to the rear of the small cavern, Jack checked his weapons, the Winchester rifle, his Colt revolver, and the hunting knife at his belt. 3 years of peaceful isolation hadn't dulled his combat instincts. They returned now with jarring familiarity. "Remember," he said before slipping out of the cave, "Samuel Hayes, Denver Post. And Caroline—" He hesitated, searching for words adequate to the moment. "Your father would be very proud of you." She nodded once, clutching the saddlebags to her chest, her eyes wide but determined. "Be careful, Jack." He sealed the hidden door behind him, ensuring it blended seamlessly back into the rock face. Then, taking a deep breath, Jack Blackwell stepped into the sunlight to face the men who had murdered a family and sought to bury the truth alongside them. Marshal Lawrence and his men had reached the base of Angel Rock and dismounted, spreading out to search the area. Jack counted 4 men. Lawrence himself, tall and gray-haired, wearing the star of federal authority on his vest. 2 rough-looking men who moved with the caution of experienced manhunters. And Jack's blood boiled at the sight Walter Montgomery, the storekeeper from Copper Falls. Montgomery, who had watched Jack for 3 years, reporting his movements to his brother, the governor. Montgomery, who had argued with Judge Hargrove before the judge's murder. Montgomery, whose presence here confirmed everything the hidden documents alleged. Jack positioned himself behind a large boulder, took careful aim with the Winchester, and fired a shot that kicked up dirt at Lawrence's feet. "That's close enough," he called out as the men scrambled for cover. "Next one won't miss." Lawrence ducked behind a fallen tree, gesturing for his men to hold their fire. "Blackwell, we just want to talk." "Strange way to start a conversation," Jack replied, shifting position to avoid giving away his exact location. 4 armed men tracking me for 2 days. "You have something that doesn't belong to you," Lawrence shouted back. "The girl, Judge Hargrove's daughter." "She's safe," Jack said, "which is more than she'd be with the men who murdered her family." A pause, then. "The Maddox gang killed the Hargroves. We're trying to bring them to justice." Jack laughed bitterly. "We both know that's a lie, Lawrence. Just like the intelligence report about Red Valley was a lie." That silenced the marshal momentarily. Jack used the opportunity to move again, circling toward the south side of the rock formation, where the terrain offered better escape routes. "You've been misled, Blackwell," Lawrence called finally. "Whatever the girl told you, whatever you think you know, it's not the full story." "I know enough," Jack responded. "I know about Morrison's land grabs. I know about the false military intelligence. I know about the survivors of Red Valley who testified to Judge Hargrove." Another silence, longer this time. Then Montgomery's voice, harsh with anger. "You always were a self-righteous bastard, Blackwell, even back in the war. That's why Sam chose you for Red Valley, knew you'd follow orders without question if you thought you were protecting innocent settlers." Jack's finger tightened on the trigger, but he held his fire. Every moment he kept them talking was another moment for Caroline to secure the documents and prepare to escape. "So Morrison did order the attack," Jack said, projecting his voice to make them think he was farther north than he actually was. "He wanted the Ute eliminated to clear the southern pass for his land development." "Progress requires sacrifice," Montgomery called back. "The territory needs development, infrastructure, civilization. The Ute were in the way, just like Hargrove was in the way." "So you killed him," Jack said. "A federal judge, his wife, his son, all to protect your brother's schemes." "We had no choice," Lawrence interjected. "Hargrove was going to publish everything. The Red Valley operation, the land deals, the diverted federal funds. It would have destroyed years of work, set the territory back decades." Jack moved again, working his way steadily south. "And the girl, Caroline. What threat does a 6-year-old pose to your grand plans for the territory?" Montgomery's laugh was ugly. "She's the last loose end, the only witness who can identify Lawrence as being present at the Hargrove house that night. Plus," Lawrence added with chilling pragmatism, "she's carrying evidence that could hang us all. Hargrove was clever, sent her to you with documentation we haven't been able to find." They were still looking for the documents, Jack realized. They didn't know about Angel Rock or the hidden cave. That gave him and Caroline an advantage if he could just keep them distracted long enough. "If you have any sense of self-preservation—" "Blackwell," Montgomery called, "you'll hand over the girl and whatever evidence she's carrying. My brother can be generous to those who help him. And if I refuse—" Jack had reached the position he wanted, a narrow defile that would allow him to retreat while maintaining cover. "Then you'll die here," Lawrence stated flatly, "along with the girl, and the truth dies with you." Jack took a deep breath, steadying himself for what came next. "You're welcome to try, Lawrence, but fair warning, I've spent 3 years on these mountains, learning every trail and ridge. You're on my territory now." With that, Jack fired 3 rapid shots, not at the men, but at the rocks above them, sending a cascade of stone and dust down on their position. In the confusion, he slipped into the defile and began running south away from Angel Rock, and more importantly, away from the hidden cave where Caroline waited. Behind him, shouts and curses erupted as Lawrence and his men recovered from the rockfall. Jack smiled grimly as he heard Montgomery bellowing orders directing the pursuit away from Angel Rock, exactly as he'd intended. Jack Blackwell had been a soldier once trained in tactics and strategy. For 3 years he'd buried those skills beneath quiet isolation and regret. Now, as he led 4 armed men away from a child, and the evidence that could bring justice to the murdered, those skills returned with fluid certainty. The hunt had begun. But Jack had no intention of being the prey. Caroline Hargrove pressed herself against the back wall of the hidden cave, straining to hear the sounds of conflict outside. Gunshots had echoed briefly, followed by shouting she couldn't quite make out. Then, silence, heavy and complete. She clutched the saddlebags containing her father's evidence, the leather warm beneath her fingers. The wooden horse sat beside her, its carved eyes seeming to watch her with patient understanding. "What should I do?" she whispered to it, seeking guidance from this last connection to her father. "Should I wait? Or go now?" The horse, of course, offered no answer. But in her mind, Caroline could hear her father's voice, calm and certain. "Trust your instincts, Caroline. They'll rarely lead you astray." Her instincts told her to wait, to give Jack time to lead the bad men away. She settled against the wall, counting slowly as he had taught her. 100 heartbeats. 200. 3. When she reached 500, Caroline moved cautiously toward the hidden door. Pressing her ear against it, she listened for any sound of human presence. Nothing but the soft whisper of wind across stone. Carefully, she activated the mechanism Jack had shown her, easing the door open just enough to peer outside. The clearing before Angel Rock stood empty, the only signs of recent occupation being scattered hoof prints, and a few spent cartridge cases gleaming in the afternoon sun. Caroline slipped from the cave, securing the door behind her. The saddlebags hung heavily across her small shoulders, but she straightened under their weight, remembering her father's words. "Stand tall, Caroline, even when burdens try to bend you." Following Jack's instructions, she located Wildcat Creek, a narrow, fast-moving stream that flowed north from the mountains. Moving alongside it, staying within the cover of trees and rocks, Caroline began her journey upstream toward the trapper's cabin Jack had mentioned. Her progress was slow, hampered by the uneven terrain and the need to remain hidden. Every few minutes, she would stop, listening intently for any sound that might indicate pursuit. But the wilderness remained quiet, except for the natural sounds of water and wind. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, Caroline found herself facing a difficult section of creek where the banks narrowed and steepened. Clambering over the rocks would be challenging for her small frame, especially while carrying the heavy saddlebags. She was calculating the safest route when a sound froze her in place, the unmistakable clink of metal on stone coming from just around the bend ahead. Someone was there on the very path she needed to take. Caroline ducked behind a large boulder, making herself as small as possible. Had one of Lawrence's men doubled back? Was it a trap? The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by labored breathing that suggested injury or exhaustion. Caroline pressed herself tighter against the boulder, hardly daring to breathe. A figure emerged around the bend. A Native American man, perhaps 50 years old, moving with the awkward gait of someone favoring an injured leg. He wore a combination of traditional Ute clothing and items of European origin, including a battered cavalry jacket that hung open over a beaded tunic. Caroline remained motionless, uncertain whether this stranger represented safety or danger. The man paused, scanning the creek bank with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to reading wilderness signs. His gaze settled on the boulder behind which she hid. "I know you are there, young one," he said, his voice low and non-threatening. "I mean you no harm." Caroline didn't move, remembering Jack's warning about strangers in these mountains. The man lowered himself carefully to a sitting position on a rock, grimacing slightly as he extended his injured leg. "My name is Joseph Standing Elk. I am a friend of your father, Judge Hargrove." At this, Caroline's heart leapt. Joseph Standing Elk, the name from the witness statement in her father's evidence. The survivor of Red Valley who had testified against Governor Morrison. Still, caution kept her hidden. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" A small smile touched the man's weathered face. "Your father carved you a wooden horse for your birthday. He spent weeks getting the mane just right." Only someone who had known her father well would know such a detail. Cautiously, Caroline emerged from her hiding place, the saddlebags still clutched protectively to her chest. "Are you really from Red Valley?" she asked. Joseph nodded, his expression growing solemn. "I am one of the few who survived that day. I was away from the village when Major Blackwell's soldiers came." His gaze sharpened. "Is he with you, Blackwell?" "He led the bad men away," Caroline explained. "Marshal Lawrence and Mr. Montgomery and 2 others. They're trying to kill us and take the evidence." Understanding dawned in Joseph's eyes. "So you found it. Your father's documentation." He indicated the saddlebags she carried. "He told me he had hidden it somewhere only you would be able to find." "At Angel Rock," Caroline confirmed. "Jack helped me open the secret door with the key from my horse." "Jack," Joseph raised an eyebrow. "You call Major Blackwell by his first name?" Caroline lifted her chin slightly. He's my friend. He's protecting me like Papa said he would. Joseph studied her thoughtfully. Your father believed Blackwell was a good man who had been used by evil ones. I was less certain. He didn't know, Caroline said firmly, about the village. He thought there were raiders there threatening settlers. Morrison lied to him. Yes, Joseph agreed quietly. I have come to believe that as well. He gestured to the creek ahead. I was headed to the trapper's cabin. It is where your father and I would meet to discuss his investigation. Is that where you are going? Caroline nodded. Jack said to meet him there if he got away from the bad men. Then we shall go together. Joseph stood with difficulty. My leg slows me down, but I know shortcuts that will get us there safely. Caroline hesitated only briefly before deciding to trust this man who had worked with her father. Can Jack find us if he's following the creek? Blackwell was a cavalry officer, Joseph said with grudging respect. If anyone can track us through these mountains, it is him. He extended his hand. Come, little one. We have much ground to cover before nightfall. Caroline took his hand, feeling calloused fingers close gently around her own. Together, they continued upstream, Joseph guiding her along paths invisible to untrained eyes, steadily climbing toward safety, and she hoped toward Jack's eventual return. Jack moved through the wilderness with the fluid efficiency of a man who had made these mountains his home. He kept to high ground, where possible using ridge lines to spot his pursuers while minimizing his own visibility. Lawrence and his men had split up with Montgomery and one of the hired guns following Jack's apparent trail south, while Lawrence and the remaining man circled back toward Angel Rock. The latter development concerned Jack deeply. If Lawrence returned to the rock formation, he might discover the hidden cave might find Caroline if she hadn't yet departed as instructed. From his current position atop a rocky knoll, Jack could see Montgomery and his companion about half a mile behind him, pushing their horses hard along the false trail he had left. Lawrence and the other man had disappeared from view, presumably having dropped into the valley below on their way back to Angel Rock. Jack made a difficult decision. He would need to circle back himself, intercepting Lawrence, before he could reach the hidden cave. That meant abandoning his current strategy of leading the pursuit away from Caroline, a risky change of plans, but necessary given the circumstances. Moving carefully down the eastern slope of the knoll, Jack plotted a route that would bring him back to Angel Rock ahead of Lawrence. The terrain was challenging, but he knew these mountains intimately after 3 years of hunting and exploring. There were trails that didn't appear on any map, passes known only to wildlife and to Jack. As he navigated a particularly treacherous section of scree, Jack's thoughts turned to Caroline. Had she left the cave as instructed? Was she making her way to the trapper's cabin even now? The responsibility he felt toward this child, a responsibility he had never sought, but now embraced, fully drove him forward, despite the burning in his muscles and the growing fatigue from hours of rapid movement. By late afternoon, Jack had reached a vantage point overlooking Angel Rock from the east. Through his spyglass, he could see Lawrence and his companion searching the area, methodically examining the ground for tracks circling the rock formation with increasing frustration. They hadn't found the hidden cave. Relief surged through Jack at this realization. Caroline must have gotten away clean, leaving no trail for Lawrence to follow. Jack was calculating his next move when a glint of metal from the northern ridge caught his eye, sunlight reflecting off a rifle barrel or spyglass. Someone else was watching Angel Rock, someone neither Lawrence nor his companion had noticed. Adjusting his spyglass, Jack focused on the ridge. A solitary figure lay prone among the rocks, a rifle trained on the 2 men below. Even at this distance, Jack could make out details: Native American clothing mixed with European garments, long hair bound at the nape, the distinctive shape of an old Springfield rifle. A Ute hunter. A trapper. Whoever it was, they clearly had Lawrence and his companion in their sights. The watcher shifted position slightly, and Jack caught a glimpse of his face, weathered, middle-aged, with the high cheekbones characteristic of the Ute people. Something about the man seemed familiar, though Jack couldn't place him. Below, Lawrence had given up his search of Angel Rock and was gesturing for his companion to mount up. They had found nothing and were preparing to rejoin the pursuit. Jack made a quick decision. Lawrence was leaving Angel Rock without discovering the hidden cave that was the important thing. Now Jack needed to find Caroline to ensure she had reached the trapper's cabin safely. He would circle north, following Wildcat Creek upstream, intercepting her path if she had followed his instructions. As Jack began his descent toward the creek, the sound of a rifle shot shattered the mountain silence. He whirled to see Lawrence's companion toppling from his horse, a red stain spreading across his chest. Lawrence himself had thrown himself from the saddle and was scrambling for cover behind a boulder, drawing his revolver as he moved. The watcher on the ridge fired again, the bullet splintering stone near Lawrence's position. Jack recognized the situation instantly, an ambush carefully planned and executed with precision. But by whom? And why now? Jack had no love for Lawrence. The man was a murderer, complicit in the deaths of Caroline's family and countless others. But a firefight here now complicated Jack's plans to reach Caroline. It would draw attention, possibly bringing Montgomery and his companion racing back to investigate. Before Jack could decide on a course of action, a movement to his right caught his eye. A figure was working its way down from the northern ridge, circling to approach Lawrence's position from behind. The ambusher was executing a classic pincer movement, one that would leave Lawrence exposed and vulnerable. Jack recognized the tactic from his military days. Whoever this ambusher was, he had military training or experience, and he was determined to kill Marshal Lawrence. Part of Jack, the part still raw with anger over Red Valley, over the Hargrove family murders, wanted to let the ambush play out. Lawrence deserved justice for his crimes. But another part, the part that had spent 3 years seeking redemption, recognized that this was not justice. This was vengeance, cold and calculated. And vengeance, Jack had learned, at terrible cost, rarely brought peace to either the avenger or the world. With a muttered curse at his own conscience, Jack raised his Winchester and fired a warning shot high over the ambusher's position, deliberately missing, but making his presence known. Both Lawrence and the unknown assailant froze, momentarily confused by this new development. "That's enough!" Jack called, his voice carrying in the mountain air. "Lawrence, drop your weapon. And you on the ridge, show yourself." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then slowly, the figure on the ridge stood, rifle held carefully at his side. He was indeed Ute, as Jack had thought, wearing a mix of traditional clothing and cast-offs from white society. "Joseph Standing Elk," the man called. "You do not recognize me, Major Blackwell, but I recognize you." Jack's blood ran cold. Standing Elk, the name from the witness testimony in Judge Hargrove's evidence. A survivor of Red Valley. "I know who you are," Jack replied, keeping his rifle trained on the man. "You testified to Judge Hargrove about Red Valley." "Yes." Standing Elk's voice carried clearly across the distance. "And now I find the man who ordered the attack on my village, protecting the man who engineered it. Curious alliances you form, Major." "I'm protecting no one," Jack said. "I'm trying to find Caroline Hargrove and get her safely to Denver with her father's evidence." At this, Lawrence laughed bitterly from his position behind the boulder. "Always the righteous one, aren't you, Blackwell? Even after Red Valley, you still think you can wash the blood from your hands." "The girl is safe," Standing Elk called, ignoring Lawrence. I found her by the creek and sent her ahead to the trapper's cabin. She carries the evidence that will bring justice to my people and to the Hargroves." Relief flooded through Jack at this news. Caroline was safe, the evidence secure. But the situation here remained volatile. "Lawrence needs to stand trial," Jack said to Standing Elk, "along with Morrison and the others. Real justice, not a bullet in the mountains, where no one will ever know the truth." Standing Elk considered this, his expression unreadable at this distance. "The white man's justice rarely serves my people, Major Blackwell. You know this." "And then help me change that," Jack urged. "Judge Hargrove believed justice was possible. He gave his life trying to expose the truth. Don't let his sacrifice be for nothing." A long silence followed, broken only by the whisper of wind through the pines. Finally, Standing Elk lowered his rifle completely. "For Judge Hargrove, then," he said, "and for his daughter who shows her father's courage." Lawrence had been listening to this exchange with growing desperation. Seeing Standing Elk lower his weapon, he suddenly broke cover, firing wildly toward the Ute before turning to run for his horse. Jack's rifle cracked once the shot precise and controlled. Lawrence stumbled, his right leg buckling beneath him as blood blossomed on his thigh. He fell hard, his revolver skittering away across the rocky ground. "It's over, Lawrence," Jack said, approaching cautiously, his rifle trained on the wounded marshal. "You'll face trial for the Hargrove murders and everything else." Lawrence glared up at him, pain and hatred twisting his features. "You're a fool, Blackwell. Morrison has judges and politicians in his pocket all the way to Washington. This will never see a courtroom." "Perhaps," Jack acknowledged. "But the evidence goes to the Denver Post first. The people will know the truth, regardless of what happens in court." Standing Elk had descended from the ridge and now stood looking down at Lawrence with cold contempt. "The children of my village, the Hargrove boy, all those deaths you ordered for land and money. Progress requires sacrifice." Lawrence spat, echoing Montgomery's earlier words. "Not these sacrifices," Jack said quietly. "Not innocent lives." He bound Lawrence's wound with practiced efficiency, then secured his hands with leather straps from his saddlebags. The marshal would live to stand trial, though he would walk with a limp for the rest of his life, assuming he avoided the hangman's noose. "The girl is waiting at the cabin," Standing Elk said as they finished, "and we still have Montgomery and his man to deal with. They will have heard the shots." Jack nodded, hefting Lawrence to his feet and supporting his weight. "Then we'd better move. It's a long walk to the trapper's cabin, especially with a wounded prisoner." Standing Elk eyed Lawrence with lingering hatred. "I would have preferred to kill him." "I know," Jack said simply. 5 years ago, I might have made the same choice. But I've learned that some debts can't be paid with more bloodshed." The Ute warrior studied Jack's face, searching for something. Whatever he found there seemed to satisfy him, for he nodded once, then turned to lead the way toward Wildcat Creek. Together, the unlikely trio began their journey toward the trapper's cabin, a Union cavalry officer turned mountain recluse, a Ute survivor of massacre, and a corrupt federal marshal who had murdered a family to protect powerful men. Behind them, Angel Rock stood silent sentinel, its outstretched wings catching the last rays of afternoon sun, its secrets now released into the world. The trapper's cabin stood in a small clearing beside Wildcat Creek, its weathered logs and sagging porch bearing testimony to years of harsh mountain winters. Built by a fur trader decades ago and abandoned when the beaver trade collapsed, it had served as Judge Hargrove's secret meeting place, a location remote enough to escape notice, yet accessible to those who knew the mountain paths. Night was falling as Jack and Standing Elk approached, half dragging a weakened Marshal Lawrence between them. The journey had been arduous, made more difficult by Lawrence's wound and his occasional attempts to escape or delay their progress. Now, as they emerged from the tree line, Jack felt a surge of anticipation mingled with concern. Was Caroline safely inside as Standing Elk had promised? "There is light," Standing Elk observed, nodding toward the cabin's single window, where a faint golden glow suggested a fire within. Jack tightened his grip on Lawrence. "Keep him quiet," he murmured to Standing Elk before calling out, "Caroline, it's Jack. I'm coming in." For a moment, silence greeted his call. Then the cabin door creaked open, and Caroline's small figure appeared in the doorway, a rifle nearly as tall as herself, held awkwardly in her hands. "Jack!" Her voice wavered with uncertainty, then strengthened as she recognized him. "You came back. I promised I would." Jack guided Lawrence forward into the pool of light spilling from the doorway. "We have a prisoner. And a friend." Caroline's gaze moved from Jack to Lawrence, her eyes hardening at the sight of the marshal who had murdered her family. Then she noticed Standing Elk, and her expression softened. "Mr. Standing Elk helped me reach the cabin," she explained to Jack. "He showed me secret paths and told me stories about my father." Standing Elk nodded solemnly. "The daughter of Judge Hargrove has her father's courage and her mother's kindness." They brought Lawrence inside, securing him to a sturdy chair with rope from the cabin's supplies. The marshal glared at them through pain-glazed eyes, but remained silent, seeming to recognize the futility of further resistance. The cabin's interior was simple but functional: a stone fireplace with a cooking hook, a rough-hewn table with 2 benches, a narrow cot in one corner, and shelves stocked with basic provisions. Caroline had already built a fire, its warmth driving back the autumn chill. Jack checked Lawrence's wound, ensuring the bandage was secure. The bullet had passed through the marshal's thigh without hitting bone or major vessels, a painful injury, but not life-threatening if infection was prevented. "Where are the documents?" Jack asked Caroline once he'd finished tending to Lawrence. She retrieved the saddlebags from beneath the cot, patting them reassuringly. "Safe. I didn't let them out of my sight, just like you said." "Good girl." Jack smiled briefly, then grew serious again as he turned to Standing Elk. "Montgomery and his man are still out there. They'll have heard the shots, and might be working their way toward us even now." Standing Elk nodded. "I know these mountains as well as you, Major. Better, perhaps. I will keep watch tonight." "We'll take turns," Jack insisted. "Neither of us is much use to Caroline if we're exhausted." As Standing Elk left to secure the perimeter and establish a watch point, Jack turned his attention to Caroline. Despite her brave face, exhaustion was evident in the shadows beneath her eyes and the slight droop of her small shoulders. "You should rest," he told her gently. "It's been a long day." And Caroline glanced at Lawrence, fear and hatred warring in her expression. "With him here, he can't hurt you," Jack assured her, "and I'll be right here all night." She nodded reluctantly, settling onto the cot, but keeping her wooden horse clutched tightly in her arms. Within minutes, despite her evident determination to stay awake, her eyelids began to flutter closed. When her breathing had deepened into sleep, Jack turned to their prisoner. Lawrence watched him with cold calculation, his professional demeanor reasserting itself despite his pain. "You won't make it off this mountain alive, Blackwell," the marshal said quietly, mindful of the sleeping child. "Not with those documents. Morrison has too much at stake." "Perhaps Jack acknowledged, checking his Winchester before setting it within easy reach. "But those documents are going to Denver, whether I make it or not. The truth about Red Valley, about Judge Hargrove's murder, about all of it won't stay buried anymore." Lawrence's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile. "Truth is, whatever those in power say it is. You should know that after your military career." The barb struck deeper than Jack cared to admit. He had followed orders at Red Valley, believing the truth presented in intelligence reports that later proved false. But that didn't mean all truth was subjective or malleable. "Judge Hargrove believed otherwise," Jack replied. "He believed truth could overcome corruption even at the highest levels. I'm inclined to give his view a chance." Lawrence studied him with a mixture of contempt and curiosity. "Why do you care, Blackwell? You've been hiding on that mountain for years. Why risk your life for a dead judge's crusade?" Jack glanced at Caroline's sleeping form, then back to Lawrence. "Because I'm tired of running from what happened at Red Valley. Because a child deserves justice for her murdered family. And because some debts can only be paid by facing the truth, not hiding from it." "Noble sentiments," Lawrence sneered. "I wonder if they'll comfort you when Morrison's men put a bullet in your head." Jack didn't respond, turning instead to examine the cabin's defenses. The conversation was pointless. Lawrence wouldn't be persuaded, and Jack had nothing to gain from continuing it. Better to focus on practical matters, securing the cabin, planning their route to Denver, preparing for Montgomery's inevitable attack. Outside, an owl called in the darkness, its voice echoing across the silent forest. The night had settled fully over the mountains, now bringing with it the heavy stillness that Jack had come to appreciate during his years of solitude. But tonight, that stillness felt oppressive rather than peaceful, pregnant with hidden threats. Somewhere in the darkness, Montgomery was hunting them, and morning would bring difficult decisions about their journey forward. Dawn broke over the mountains, painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Jack stood on the cabin's porch, surveying the clearing and the forest beyond with practiced vigilance. Standing Elk had taken the final watch of the night, allowing Jack a few hours of restless sleep. Now the Ute warrior approached from the tree line, his expression grave. Montgomery and his man, Standing Elk, reported without preamble. "They are camped 2 miles downstream. They found Lawrence's horse in the night and are searching the area methodically." Jack nodded, having expected as much. "How long until they find this cabin?" "Hours, perhaps. A day at most." Standing Elk gazed toward the eastern ridge. "We should move soon, while we still have the advantage of surprise." Inside the cabin, Caroline was awake, carefully repacking the saddlebags with the precious documents. Lawrence remained bound to the chair, his face pale with pain, but his eyes alert, missing nothing. "We need to reach Denver," Jack said as he re-entered the cabin. "The direct route would take us northeast from here, following the Eagle River Valley before joining the Denver Road." "Too exposed," Standing Elk countered. "Montgomery will expect that. He may already have men watching the main trails." "What do you suggest?" Jack spread out a rough map on the table, a hand-drawn affair that Judge Hargrove had apparently left in the cabin for emergencies. Standing Elk studied it thoughtfully. "Here," he said, indicating a faint line that wound through the mountains east of their position. "An old Ute trail. Difficult terrain, but it will bring us to the Denver Road, a day's journey south of Idaho Springs. From there, another day to Denver itself." Jack traced the route with his finger. It was indeed challenging, crossing 2 high ridges before descending into the watershed that fed Clear Creek. But it would avoid the more traveled paths where Montgomery might set an ambush. "Can we make it with a wounded prisoner?" Jack asked, glancing at Lawrence. Standing Elk's expression hardened. "Leave him, or end him. He slows us down and threatens the child's safety." Lawrence tensed at these words but remained silent, watching the exchange with calculating eyes. Jack shook his head. He faces trial for his crimes. Justice, not vengeance. Your justice, not mine, Standing Elk replied bitterly. My people have seen little justice from white courts. My papa said good rules should be for everybody. Caroline interjected, her chin lifting with childlike determination. That's why he wrote everything down. That's why the bad men hurt him. Standing Elk regarded her thoughtfully, his weathered face softening slightly. Your father was an unusual white man, little one. He listened when others would not hear. So will the readers of the Denver Post, Jack said, seizing the opening Caroline had created. Samuel Hayes will publish the truth regardless of Morrison's influence. The people will know what happened at Red Valley, what happened to the Hargroves. Standing Elk remained skeptical, but nodded reluctantly. I will guide you on the Ute Trail, but the marshal is your responsibility, Major. If he endangers the child, I will not hesitate. Understood. Jack turned to Lawrence. You hear that, Marshal? Your life depends on your cooperation. Try anything and I won't be able to protect you from Standing Elk's justice. Lawrence grimaced. As if I have a choice with a bullet in my leg and a mountain between me and civilization. You always have a choice, Jack replied evenly. Just as you chose to murder a family on Morrison's orders. That silenced Lawrence, his gaze dropping to the cabin floor. They prepared to depart quickly, gathering only essential supplies. Jack fashioned a crude crutch for Lawrence from a forked branch, allowing the marshal to hobble with minimal assistance. Caroline secured the saddlebags across her back, their precious contents safely stowed alongside her wooden horse. What about Montgomery? She asked as they made final preparations. Won't he follow our trail? Let him try, Standing Elk said with grim satisfaction. The Ute Trail reveals itself only to those who know its secrets. They left the cabin as the morning sun cleared the eastern ridge, moving in single file with Standing Elk leading the way, Caroline in the middle, and Jack bringing up the rear with Lawrence hobbling before him. The marshal's progress was slow and painful, but he made no complaint, seeming to understand that his survival depended on keeping pace. The Ute Trail proved to be exactly as Standing Elk had described, challenging and obscure, often indistinguishable from the surrounding wilderness to untrained eyes. It wound through dense stands of pine and aspen, crossed tumbling mountain streams, and skirted sheer cliffs that dropped hundreds of feet to the valleys below. By midday, they had climbed nearly 2,000 feet in elevation, reaching a wind-swept ridge that offered views stretching to the horizon in every direction. Jack used the opportunity to scan their back trail with his spyglass, searching for any sign of pursuit. Anything? Standing Elk asked, resting on a boulder while Caroline shared water with Lawrence. Nothing obvious, Jack replied. But that doesn't mean they're not following. Montgomery knows these mountains almost as well as we do. Standing Elk nodded, his expression somber. The governor's brother has hunted these ranges for 20 years. He will not give up easily, especially with so much at stake. Then we keep moving. Jack stowed the spyglass in his pack. How much farther to the high pass? We will reach it by nightfall if we maintain this pace. Standing Elk glanced at Lawrence, who sat wheezing on a fallen log, his face gray with exhaustion. Though that seems increasingly doubtful. Lawrence caught the look and straightened, gripping his makeshift crutch with renewed determination. I'll keep up. I'm not eager to be left behind for Montgomery to find. Jack studied the marshal thoughtfully. Lawrence was a murderer, corrupt to his core, but he was also a survivor. The instinct for self-preservation might prove stronger than his loyalty to Morrison, a potential advantage Jack could exploit, if necessary. They continued their ascent, the trail growing steeper and more treacherous as they approached the high mountain pass that would take them into the next watershed. The air thinned with altitude, making each step more demanding, especially for Lawrence with his wounded leg, and for Caroline with her small lungs. Jack found himself increasingly impressed by the girl's endurance. She matched their pace without complaint, her determined expression mirroring that of her father in the photograph Jack had seen on the wanted poster. Judge Hargrove had raised a daughter with uncommon strength, both physical and moral. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, bathing the landscape in golden light, Standing Elk paused at a narrow defile between two towering rock formations. "Beyond this pass lies the sacred valley," he explained. "We will camp there tonight. The spirits of my ancestors will shield us from unfriendly eyes." Jack nodded, respecting the Ute warrior's beliefs, even if he didn't share them. After Red Valley, he was in no position to discount Native American spiritual traditions. The defile opened onto a stunning alpine meadow nestled between protective ridges. A small lake gleamed at its center, fed by snowmelt streams that trickled down from the surrounding peaks. Stands of stunted pine provided natural windbreaks, and flat areas of grass offered comfortable sleeping spots. "It's beautiful," Caroline whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the vista. "A sacred place to my people for many generations," Standing Elk confirmed. "Few white men have seen this valley." They made camp near the lakeshore, beneath a cluster of pines that would conceal their fire from distant observation. Lawrence collapsed gratefully onto a bed of pine boughs, his leg clearly causing him significant pain despite his stoic facade. Jack checked the marshal's wound, noting with concern the reddened skin around the entry and exit points. Infection was setting in, despite his best efforts at field treatment. "You need proper medical attention," Jack told him bluntly. "This is beyond what I can treat with our supplies." Lawrence's mouth twisted in a humorless smile. "Worried about your prisoner dying before he can testify, Blackwell. Worried about a man dying in my custody, regardless of his crimes," Jack corrected, applying a fresh bandage from their limited medical supplies. Standing Elk watched this exchange with poorly concealed contempt. "The marshal's fate is of his own making. Save your concern for the child." Jack glanced at Caroline, who was gathering kindling for their fire with the efficiency of someone already accustomed to wilderness survival. Despite her apparent resilience, the past days had taken their toll. She moved with the careful deliberation of extreme fatigue, and her small face had grown thinner, the bones more prominent beneath her skin. "We all need rest," Jack said, rising from Lawrence's side. "I'll take first watch tonight. Standing Elk, you take second. We'll move out at first light." As darkness settled over the sacred valley, Jack positioned himself on a rock outcropping that provided views of both their camp and the pass through which they had entered. The night was clear, and cold stars emerging like diamonds scattered across black velvet. In the distance, an elk bugled its challenge to rival males, the sound echoing hauntingly across the valley. Jack found his thoughts turning to his cabin on Bear Mountain, to the quiet life he had built there after leaving the military. 3 years of solitude, of careful isolation from the very world that now pursued them through these mountains. Had it been penance or merely escape? He wasn't sure anymore. Movement at the camp drew his attention. Caroline had emerged from her bedroll and was making her way toward his position, the wooden horse clutched in one hand. Jack watched her approach, noting how she picked her path carefully over the uneven ground, moving with the natural caution of a child raised to be mindful of her surroundings. "You should be sleeping," he said gently as she reached his side. "I can't." She settled beside him on the rock, hugging her knees to her chest. "Every time I close my eyes, I see them, Mama, and Papa, and Thomas. Jack nodded, understanding. The memories are still fresh. They'll never go away completely, but in time, they won't ambush you quite so often. Is that how it is for you with Red Valley? The question, so direct and perceptive, caught Jack off guard. Yes, he admitted after a moment. In the beginning, I couldn't close my eyes without seeing the village burning, hearing the screams. Now, the memories come less often, but they never truly leave. Caroline was quiet for a long moment, her small fingers tracing the contours of the wooden horse. Papa said you were a good man, who made a terrible mistake because bad men lied to you. He said that's why you went to live on the mountain, because you were trying to punish yourself. Jack stared out at the starlit valley, weighing his response. Your father was very perceptive. Yes, I went to the mountain to escape what I'd done. I thought isolation was the proper penance for my sins. Was it? Jack smiled sadly at her directness. No, I realize that now. True penance isn't hiding from your mistakes. It's facing them, trying to make amends however possible. Like helping us get Papa's evidence to Denver. Exactly like that. Caroline nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. She leaned slightly against Jack's side, her small body radiating surprising warmth in the mountain chill. Jack, she said after another long silence, what happens after we get to Denver and give Mr. Hayes the evidence? The question had been hovering in Jack's own mind, unexamined until now. What did come after? Return to his solitary existence on Bear Mountain that hardly seemed possible now, with Morrison's men aware of his location and involvement. I don't know, he answered honestly. I suppose that depends partly on what you want to happen. Caroline looked up at him, her expression serious in the starlight. I want to stay with you. You're the mountain guardian. Papa sent me to you because he knew you'd protect me. Jack felt a surge of emotion, protectiveness, responsibility, and something deeper that he hesitated to name. This child had come to trust him completely, to see in him something worthy despite his past sins. Is that even possible? He asked gently. There might be relatives who would have a better claim. There aren't, Caroline interrupted. Mama was an only child. Her parents died before I was born. Papa's family is all back east, and they never approved of him becoming a frontier judge. Her small hand found Jack's larger one. You're the only family I have now. Family? The word resonated within Jack like a bell struck after years of silence. He had been alone for so long by choice, by penance, by habit. The idea of responsibility for this child terrified him. And yet, we'll figure it out, he promised, squeezing her hand gently. Together, but first we need to reach Denver safely. Caroline nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. We will. The mountain guardian and his brave girl. The phrase, so simple, so filled with faith, lodged in Jack's heart like an arrow. Whatever happened in Denver, whatever came after, he knew in that moment that his life had irrevocably changed. The solitary man who had fled to the mountains was gone, replaced by someone with responsibilities, with connections, with purpose, beyond mere survival. You should try to sleep, he said finally. Tomorrow will be another hard day of travel. Caroline nodded, but made no move to leave his side. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened, her small body relaxing against him as sleep claimed her at last. Jack remained motionless, unwilling to disturb her rest. Above them, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human concerns, yet somehow comforting in their constancy. Whatever happened in the days ahead, these mountains would remain, these stars would shine, these truths would endure. For the first time in 3 years, Jack Blackwell felt a sense of peace that had nothing to do with isolation and everything to do with purpose. Whatever came next, he would face it not alone, as he had faced his guilt over Red Valley, but with Caroline at his side, and with a chance to right at least some of the wrongs he had been party to. The Mountain Guardian. Perhaps, at last, he could become worthy of the title. They departed the sacred valley at first light, descending the eastern slope toward the watershed that would eventually lead them to the Denver Road. Standing Elk set a careful pace, mindful of both Caroline's shorter stride and Lawrence's wounded leg. The marshal had developed a fever during the night, his face flushed and his movements increasingly uncoordinated. "He won't make it to Denver," Standing Elk observed quietly to Jack as they paused to rest beside a tumbling stream. "The wound festers. Without proper medicine, blood poisoning will take him within days." Jack watched Lawrence slumped against a boulder, his eyes glazed with pain and fever. "We need him to testify about the Hargrove murders, about Morrison's involvement." "The documents speak for themselves," Standing Elk argued. "The marshal's testimony is convenient, not essential." Before Jack could respond, Caroline approached, her face serious, as she handed Lawrence a water skin. "You killed my family," she said, her voice small but steady. "Papa, Mama, and Thomas." Lawrence stared at her, surprise momentarily overcoming his fever. "Yes," he admitted finally. "Why?" The simple question hung in the air between them, powerful in its childlike directness. Lawrence took a sip of water, his hand shaking slightly. "Orders. Morrison wanted your father silenced before he could publish his evidence. Did you know about the bad things, the things Papa was writing down?" "Some of it." Lawrence's gaze flickered to Jack, then back to Caroline. "I knew Morrison had engineered the massacre to clear Ute land for development. Your father had proof." Tears welled in Caroline's eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. "You hurt my whole family just for money." Lawrence flinched, whether from pain or the directness of her accusation Jack couldn't tell. "I was following orders." He repeated the justification, sounding hollow even to his own ears. "So was Jack," Caroline replied, "when he attacked Mr. Standing Elk's village. But he's trying to make it right. You're still trying to hide what you did." The observation, coming from a 6-year-old, landed with devastating accuracy. Lawrence had no response, his gaze dropping to the ground in what might have been shame or merely exhaustion. Caroline turned away from the marshal, moving to where Jack and Standing Elk stood. "He's very sick," she said quietly. "Will he die?" Jack knelt to her level, meeting her gaze directly. "Possibly. His wound is infected, and we're still days from proper medical help." She nodded, processing this information with the same gravity she brought to everything. "I don't want him to die," she said finally. "I want him to tell everyone what he did, what Governor Morrison ordered. I want justice, not revenge." Standing Elk made a soft sound that might have been surprise or respect. "You are indeed your father's daughter, little one." They continued their journey following a steep trail that wound between towering pines and across alpine meadows still vibrant with late summer wildflowers. By mid-afternoon, they had descended nearly 3,000 feet in elevation, the air growing thicker and warmer as they left the high country behind. Jack maintained a vigilant watch on their back trail, expecting Montgomery to appear at any moment. The storekeeper was too experienced a woodsman to be thrown off for long, even by Standing Elk's obscure Ute path. As they rounded a bend in the trail, Standing Elk suddenly raised his hand in warning, dropping into a crouch. Jack immediately pulled Caroline behind the shelter of a large boulder, signaling Lawrence to remain absolutely still. "What is it?" Jack whispered, moving forward to join Standing Elk. The Ute warrior pointed to a thin column of smoke rising from the valley below them, perhaps 2 miles ahead on their path. A camp, recently made. Jack studied the smoke through his spyglass. Too small for a mining operation or a settlement. Hunters, maybe, or an ambush, Standing Elk replied grimly. The smoke is visible for miles, a signal perhaps, or a trap to draw us in. Jack considered their options. They could detour around the camp, adding miles and hours to their journey, or they could approach, cautiously determine who waited below and act accordingly. "Let me scout ahead," Standing Elk suggested. "I can move more quietly than you, and my eyes are accustomed to reading sign that white men miss." Jack nodded agreement. "Be careful. If it's Montgomery." "I will not engage unless forced," Standing Elk assured him. "Information only." As the Ute warrior melted into the forest with remarkable silence, Jack returned to Caroline and Lawrence. The marshal had slumped against a tree trunk. His breathing labored, his skin alarmingly pale beneath the fever flush. "Is it Montgomery?" Caroline asked quietly, her eyes wide but her voice steady. "We don't know yet," Jack told her honestly. "Standing Elk has gone to find out. Until he returns, we stay hidden." Caroline nodded, settling beside Jack with the patience of someone far older. Together, they waited the forest quiet around them, save for the occasional call of a bird or the rustle of wind through pine needles. Nearly an hour passed before Standing Elk reappeared, moving as silently as he had departed. His expression was troubled as he joined them in their hiding place. "Not Montgomery," he reported. "Something worse, perhaps. Soldiers. A patrol from Fort Richardson, led by a captain named Hollister. 6 men, well armed." Jack frowned. "Military. Why would they be patrolling this far from the fort?" "They spoke of searching for fugitives," Standing Elk replied. "A corrupt marshal, a kidnapped child, a renegade Ute, and a former officer gone mad with guilt. They have descriptions of all of us." Jack's blood ran cold. "Morrison has mobilized the military against us. He must have connections at Fort Richardson, officers who owe him favors or share in his schemes." "The captain mentioned rewards," Standing Elk confirmed. $500 for the child returned safely, 1,000 for you captured alive. Nothing for the Ute or the marshal. We are to be shot on sight as dangerous fugitives." Caroline pressed closer to Jack's side, her small body trembling slightly despite her brave face. "What do we do now?" Jack considered their situation. 6 trained soldiers versus their small party, which included a wounded man and a child. A direct confrontation would be suicidal. But they couldn't turn back. Montgomery surely followed their trail, closing the trap from behind, while the soldiers blocked the path ahead. "We need to split up," Jack said finally, the decision painful but necessary. "Standing Elk. You take Caroline and the documents. Continue east on the Ute Trail until you reach the Denver Road, then south to the city. Find Samuel Hayes at the Denver Post." "No," Caroline clutched Jack's arm. "We stay together, you promised." "I promised to get you and the evidence safely to Denver," Jack reminded her gently. "This is the best way to keep that promise. Standing Elk can move faster with just you, avoid the soldiers more easily." "What about you?" Her voice wavered for the first time since they'd left the cabin. "I'll create a diversion," Jack explained. "Make the soldiers think we're all heading north toward the mining camps. Give you time to reach the Denver Road." "And the marshal?" Standing Elk asked, nodding toward Lawrence, who watched this exchange through fever-glazed eyes. Jack hesitated. Taking Lawrence with him would slow him down, make the diversion less effective. But leaving the wounded man behind was tantamount to a death sentence, especially in his current condition. "He comes with me," Jack decided finally. "I'll get him to the mining camp at Silver Gulch. There's a doctor there who can treat his wound. If he survives, I'll bring him to Denver to testify." Standing Elk clearly disapproved, but nodded acceptance. "When do we separate?" "Now," Jack said, glancing at the sun's position. "You have about 4 hours of daylight left. Make the most of it. Travel through the night if you can. The soldiers won't risk night movement in this terrain." Caroline's face had set into a mask of determined control, but her eyes betrayed her fear. "I don't want to leave you," she whispered. Jack knelt before her, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "This isn't goodbye, Caroline. It's just a temporary separation. I'll find you in Denver at the newspaper office. I promise." She searched his face, looking for reassurance. "The mountain guardian always keeps his promises. Always." Jack confirmed, his throat tight with emotion. "Now I need you to be brave for a little longer. Can you do that?" Caroline nodded solemnly, then surprised Jack by throwing her arms around his neck in a fierce hug. "Be careful," she whispered against his ear. "You too, brave girl." Jack returned the embrace, then gently set her away. "The saddlebags with the documents, keep them safe." "I will." Caroline squared her small shoulders, turning to Standing Elk with newfound determination. "I'm ready, Mr. Standing Elk." The Ute warrior nodded approvingly. "Then let us walk the hidden path, daughter of Hargrove. The spirits of my ancestors will guide our steps." Jack watched as Standing Elk led Caroline deeper into the forest, following a trail visible only to his experienced eyes. The girl glanced back, once her face solemn but resolute. The wooden horse clutched in one hand, while the other held the precious saddlebags. When they had vanished from sight, Jack turned to Lawrence. The marshal watched him through pain-dulled eyes, understanding dawning slowly on his fevered features. "You're risking your life for the child," Lawrence observed, his voice weak, but still carrying that professional detachment. "Sacrificing yourself to ensure her escape." "If necessary," Jack acknowledged, helping Lawrence to his feet. "Though I prefer to think of it as creating options. Now come on, we need to make an obvious trail heading north enough to draw those soldiers away from Standing Elk and Caroline." Lawrence leaned heavily on Jack's shoulder as they began moving deliberately, leaving clear signs of their passage: broken branches, disturbed undergrowth, even an occasional footprint in soft earth. Jack wanted the soldiers to find this trail, to follow it away from the Ute path that would carry Caroline safely to Denver. "Why," Lawrence asked, after they had traveled perhaps half a mile, "why risk everything for a child you barely know, for justice that may never come?" Jack paused, adjusting his support of Lawrence's weakening frame. "Because 3 years ago I gave an order that killed innocent people based on lies told by powerful men. I can't bring those people back, but I can ensure their story is told. I can help Caroline find justice for her family. Some debts can never be fully repaid, but that doesn't mean we stop trying." Lawrence absorbed this, his feverish gaze fixed on Jack's face. "And if we're caught, if Morrison's soldiers kill us both, then at least I'll die trying to right a wrong rather than hiding from it." Jack resumed their northward trek, deliberately snapping twigs underfoot. "And you, Marshal, will have taken one step toward atonement, small though it may be." They continued their journey as the afternoon waned, creating an obvious trail that any competent tracker would find. Jack estimated they had traveled nearly 2 miles north of the separation point, when shouted commands echoed through the forest behind them. "Soldiers! Jack confirmed, helping Lawrence into a concealed position behind a fallen log. "They've found our trail just as I intended. Now we need to stay ahead of them, lead them as far from Standing Elk and Caroline as possible." Lawrence nodded weakly, his strength clearly failing. "I won't make it much further," he admitted. "The fever, it's getting worse." Jack checked the marshal's wound, grimacing at the angry red streaks extending from the bullet holes. Blood poisoning advancing rapidly. Without proper medical attention, Lawrence would be dead within a day, perhaps less. "Silver Gulch is still hours away," Jack muttered, more to himself than to Lawrence. "You need a doctor now." A grim smile twisted Lawrence's pale lips. "Ironic, isn't it? After everything I've done, it's a bullet wound that finishes me." Jack made a swift decision. "Wait here. Stay hidden. I'm going to draw them away, then circle back for you." "Don't be a fool, Blackwell." Lawrence gripped Jack's wrist with surprising strength. "Save yourself. Get to the girl. My testimony won't matter if Morrison's men capture her before she reaches Denver." "I'm not leaving you to die," Jack insisted. "I'm already dying." Lawrence's gaze was suddenly clear, the fever granting a moment of lucidity. "But before I go, there's something you should know. Something about Red Valley that isn't in Hargrove's evidence." Jack went still, his attention wholly focused on the marshal's face. "What about Red Valley?" "There's something about Red Valley that Hargrove never found evidence for." Lawrence whispered, his breath coming in short gasps. "Gold, a vein richer than anything in California or the Black Hills, running directly beneath the Ute village. Gold." Jack felt the ground shift beneath him. The pieces suddenly aligned with sickening clarity. Lawrence nodded weakly. Morrison had a secret survey done. He knew exactly where it was. Couldn't just announce it. Every prospector in the territory would have swarmed the area. Needed the Ute gone quietly, with no questions asked. The revelation struck Jack like a physical blow. Not just land for development or southern passes for trade routes, but simple, naked greed. The oldest motivation for man's inhumanity to man. "No paper trail," Lawrence continued, his voice fading. "No witnesses, except you and Standing Elk. And neither of you knew what you were really being used for." Shouts sounded closer now, the soldiers methodically tracking their path through the forest. Jack knew he should move, should create the diversion he had planned, but the weight of Lawrence's revelation held him motionless. "Why tell me this now?" he asked finally. Lawrence's eyes were glazing over again as the fever reclaimed him. "Maybe I want one decent act to balance the scales, however slightly." A bitter smile. "Or maybe I just want Morrison to lose after all." Before Jack could respond, a rifle shot cracked through the forest, the bullet splintering bark from a tree just inches from his head. The soldiers had found them. "Go," Lawrence urged, pushing weakly at Jack's chest. "Tell the truth about Red Valley. All of it." Jack hesitated only a moment before squeezing Lawrence's shoulder once in acknowledgement. Then he was moving, darting between trees, drawing the soldiers' fire away from the dying marshal's position. "There, get him." A commanding voice. Captain Hollister presumably directed the pursuit as Jack fled northward, making his trail obvious while staying just ahead of the soldiers' line of sight. For nearly an hour, Jack led the patrol on a winding chase through the forest, gradually pulling them away from both Lawrence's hiding place and the eastern trail that Standing Elk and Caroline followed. When he judged they had been drawn far enough astray, Jack doubled back through a rocky stream bed, where he would leave no tracks, circling wide to avoid the pursuing soldiers. Darkness was falling by the time he returned to where he had left Lawrence. The marshal lay exactly as Jack had left him, but the rise and fall of his chest had ceased. "William Lawrence, federal marshal and murderer, had died alone in the wilderness, his final confession, perhaps his only act of redemption. Jack knelt beside the body, closing Lawrence's staring eyes. "May you find more peace than you granted others," he murmured, the closest thing to a prayer he could manage for the man who had murdered Caroline's family. The sound of voices in the distance reminded Jack that his own danger remained acute. The soldiers would eventually realize they had been led astray and would return to search the area more thoroughly. With a final glance at Lawrence's body, Jack moved eastward, following the path that Standing Elk and Caroline had taken hours earlier. His diversion had bought them valuable time, but the danger was far from past. Morrison's reach extended further than any of them had anticipated, encompassing not just corrupt lawmen, but military forces as well. The race to Denver had become even more desperate than before, not just for justice, but for survival itself. The Denver road stretched before Caroline like a pale ribbon in the moonlight, its rutted surface worn by the passage of countless wagons, coaches, and riders. Standing Elk had led her through the wilderness for 2 days since their separation from Jack, following hidden trails and obscure passages that no ordinary traveler would notice. Now, as they crouched in the undergrowth beside the road, the Ute warrior studied the path in both directions, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. "No patrols," he said finally. "We can follow the road now, though we should stay in the trees where possible." Caroline nodded, adjusting the saddlebags that seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. Her legs ached from the constant walking, and hunger gnawed at her belly, despite the meager rations Standing Elk had provided from plants and small game. "How much farther to Denver?" she asked, her voice small in the vastness of the night. "A day's journey," Standing Elk replied. "We will reach the city by tomorrow evening if we maintain our pace." Caroline straightened her shoulders, determination overriding her fatigue. "I can do it, for Papa and Jack." Standing Elk's expression softened slightly. "You have shown courage beyond your years, daughter of Hargrove. Your father would be proud." They moved onto the road, walking southward toward the distant lights of Denver. Standing Elk set a pace that Caroline could maintain, though she sensed he could have moved much faster alone. As they walked, Caroline's thoughts returned to Jack, as they had constantly since their separation. Had he escaped the soldiers? Was he following them even now, keeping his promise to meet her in Denver? Or had Morrison's men captured him, silencing the truth he had helped her carry from the mountains? "Will Jack be all right?" she asked abruptly, voicing the fear that had haunted her for days. Standing Elk considered this question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Blackwell is a skilled woodsman and a former soldier. If any man can evade Morrison's patrols, it is him." It wasn't precisely the reassurance Caroline sought, but she accepted it with a nod. Standing Elk never offered false comfort, treating her with the same direct honesty he would an adult. She appreciated this, even when the truth was difficult to hear. They continued through the night, resting briefly when Caroline's strength flagged, but pressing onward with relentless purpose. By dawn, the road had widened and signs of civilization appeared more frequently: fenced pastures, the occasional farmhouse road markers indicating the distance to Denver. Standing Elk became increasingly tense as they encountered other travelers, farmers bringing produce to market, miners heading to the city to spend their earnings, families in wagons laden with belongings. He kept Caroline close, his hand often resting protectively on her shoulder as they yielded the road to passing vehicles. "We are being watched," he murmured as they paused to rest in a grove of cottonwoods beside the road. "Morrison has eyes everywhere now that we approach the city." Caroline clutched the wooden horse tighter, finding comfort in its familiar contours. "What do we do?" "We continue," Standing Elk replied simply. but with greater caution. "Stay close to me. Speak to no one." As the day advanced, the traffic on the road increased steadily. Standing Elk guided them to walk along the edge of the forest that bordered the road, providing some concealment while allowing them to maintain their pace toward Denver. By late afternoon, the city itself came into view, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in the valley where Cherry Creek joined the South Platte River. Smoke rose from hundreds of chimneys, and the sounds of urban life carried faintly on the breeze. "So many people," Caroline whispered, awed by the sight after days in the wilderness. Leadville had been a good-sized town, but Denver was a true city, the largest she had ever seen. "Too many," Standing Elk agreed, his expression guarded. "Finding the newspaper office will not be simple." They approached the outskirts of Denver as dusk gathered the city's buildings, casting long shadows across their path. Standing Elk's pace slowed, his gaze constantly scanning their surroundings for threats. "Something is wrong," he said, suddenly pulling Caroline into the shelter of a roadside thicket. "Wait here. Do not move until I return." Before Caroline could protest, he had melted into the gathering darkness, leaving her alone with the precious saddlebags and her wooden horse. She made herself as small as possible within the thicket, remembering Jack's lessons about staying hidden. Minutes stretched endlessly as she waited, straining her ears for any sound of Standing Elk's return. Instead, she heard the steady clop of hooves approaching along the road, a single rider moving at an unhurried pace. Caroline held her breath as the rider drew near her hiding place. Through gaps in the foliage, she could make out a dark horse and a figure in the distinctive uniform of a territorial official. The rider reined in almost directly opposite her thicket, surveying the roadside with careful attention. "I know you're there, Caroline," called a familiar voice that sent ice through her veins. "There's no need to hide anymore. Your journey is over." Walter Montgomery, the storekeeper from Copper Falls, Governor Morrison's brother, sat astride his horse not 20 feet from her hiding place, a rifle resting casually across his saddle. "Your Ute friend won't be coming back," Montgomery continued conversationally. "My men intercepted him half a mile ahead. Quite a struggle he put up, but ultimately futile." Caroline remained absolutely still, not even breathing, hoping Montgomery was bluffing, trying to draw her out. "Come now, child. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." Montgomery's voice hardened. "I have 20 men searching this area. You'll be found eventually. Better to come out now before anyone gets hurt." Still, Caroline didn't move. Jack had taught her to stay hidden until absolutely certain it was safe to emerge. Montgomery might be lying about Standing Elk, about having 20 men. She clutched the wooden horse tighter, drawing strength from this last connection to her father. Montgomery sighed audibly. "Very well. Have it your way." He raised his voice. "Begin the search. Every thicket, every hollow. Find the girl." Voices responded from multiple directions, and Caroline heard the sounds of men moving through underbrush, systematic and thorough. Montgomery hadn't been bluffing after all. Panic fluttered in her chest as the searchers drew closer to her hiding place. She couldn't outrun them, couldn't fight them. But she still had one option: the saddlebags. If she couldn't deliver the evidence herself, perhaps she could hide it where it might eventually be found. Moving with painful slowness to avoid rustling the foliage around her, Caroline removed the most important documents from the saddlebags: the testimony about Red Valley, the financial records linking Morrison to the massacre, Lawrence's signed confession about the Hargrove murders. These she tucked into the hollow compartment of her wooden horse, carefully resealing it as Jack had shown her. The horse she could keep with her. It would look like nothing more than a child's toy to Montgomery and his men. The rest of the documents, still damning but less critical, remained in the saddlebags. Just as she completed this task, a shout went up from nearby. "Over here, I see something!" Caroline froze as footsteps approached her thicket, heavy boots crushing the undergrowth. A hand thrust through the branches, seizing her arm in a painful grip. "Got her!" a rough voice called triumphantly. Caroline was dragged unceremoniously from her hiding place, the saddlebags torn from her grasp as she emerged. Only the wooden horse remained in her possession, clutched desperately to her chest as she was brought before Montgomery. The storekeeper smiled down at her from his hoarse satisfaction, evident in every line of his face. "Caroline Hargrove, you've led us quite a chase, young lady." "Where's Mr. Standing Elk?" she demanded, her voice steady despite her fear. Montgomery's smile widened. "Concerned for the savage. How touching. He's being taken care of, I assure you." One of the men handed Montgomery the saddlebags. He opened them immediately, rifling through the documents within his expression, growing increasingly troubled. "These are incomplete," he said finally, his gaze sharpening as it returned to Caroline. "The most damning evidence is missing." Caroline lifted her chin defiantly. "I don't know what you're talking about." Montgomery's face darkened. "Don't test my patience, child. I know exactly what was in that safe at Angel Rock." "Jack sent them ahead," Caroline lied, clutching the wooden horse tighter. "To Mr. Hayes at the Denver Post. They're probably being printed in tomorrow's newspaper." Montgomery studied her face, searching for the truth. Caroline met his gaze steadily, remembering her father's advice. When telling an untruth, Caroline looked directly at the person. Liars often look away, thinking it makes them appear thoughtful. It actually makes them appear dishonest. "Search her," Montgomery ordered finally. "Every pocket, every fold of clothing." Rough hands patted down Caroline's dress, checked her pockets, examined her boots. They found nothing, not realizing that the most damning evidence lay within the wooden horse she still clutched. "Nothing, sir," reported the searcher. Montgomery frowned, clearly unconvinced. "And the toy? Have you checked that?" Caroline's heart lurched as a man reached for the wooden horse. "It's just a toy," she protested. "My father made it for me." "Check it anyway," Montgomery insisted. The man took the horse from Caroline's reluctant grasp, turning it over in his hands. "Seems solid," he reported after a cursory examination. "Break it open," Montgomery ordered. The judge was clever enough to hide documents in a cave. He might have hollowed out a toy as well. "No!" Caroline lunged for the horse, but strong hands held her back. The man drew his knife, preparing to split the wooden toy down its center. "Stop," a voice commanded from the darkness beyond the road. "Release the child and step away." Every head turned toward the voice. Samuel Hayes, editor of the Denver Post, stood at the edge of the tree line, a shotgun leveled at Montgomery. Behind him waited a dozen armed men, not soldiers or lawmen, but ordinary citizens bearing rifles, shotguns, and pistols. "This doesn't concern you, Hayes," Montgomery called, his hand moving toward his own weapon. "The child is wanted for questioning in her family's murder. I'm returning her to proper authorities." "Interesting," Hayes replied, his shotgun unwavering. "Because I have in my possession sworn testimony from Marshal William Lawrence, naming you and your brother as the architects of the Hargrove family massacre." Montgomery paled visibly. "Impossible. Lawrence is dead." "His deathbed confession reached me yesterday," Hayes continued, "delivered by a very determined former cavalry officer who crossed these mountains with a bullet in his shoulder and a story that will shake this territory to its foundations." "Jack." Caroline's heart leapt at this indirect confirmation that he had survived. Jack made it to Denver. Hayes nodded, his gaze still fixed on Montgomery. Major Blackwell has been quite thorough in his documentation, as has a certain Ute gentleman who arrived at my office this morning with additional testimony about Red Valley. Standing Elk had reached Denver safely as well. Caroline felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. Montgomery's composure cracked. "You're bluffing. The documents are being typeset as we speak," Hayes interrupted. "Tomorrow's edition of the Denver Post will carry the full story: the massacre at Red Valley, the gold vein beneath the Ute village, the murder of Judge Hargrove and his family, the corruption extending to the territorial governor's office." Montgomery's face contorted with rage. His hand flashed to his holster, drawing his revolver with practiced speed. Before he could fire, Hayes's shotgun roared the blast, catching Montgomery squarely in the chest. The storekeeper toppled backward from his horse, dead before he hit the ground. "Anyone else care to object?" Hayes asked calmly, breaking open his shotgun to reload. Montgomery's men, faced with a dozen armed citizens and the death of their leader, quickly surrendered. Caroline found herself released, the wooden horse thrust back into her hands by a suddenly solicitous captor. Hayes approached, his weathered face kind as he knelt before her. "Caroline Hargrove, I'm Samuel Hayes. Your father was a friend of mine, and I believe you have something for me." Caroline clutched the wooden horse to her chest. "Where's Jack and Mr. Standing Elk?" "Safe at my office in the city," Hayes assured her. "They've been quite worried about you. Shall we join them?" Caroline nodded, relief washing through her in a wave so powerful it nearly brought her to her knees. "The evidence is in the horse," she whispered, holding out the carved toy. "Papa made a special compartment." Hayes accepted the wooden horse with reverent hands, understanding its significance both as evidence and as Caroline's treasured connection to her father. "Then let's get you and this evidence to safety. There's someone very anxious to see you." The offices of the Denver Post hummed with activity, despite the late-hour typesetters and printers working frantically to prepare the next day's edition. Hayes led Caroline through the organized chaos to a small office at the rear of the building where a familiar figure stood at the window, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the lamplight. "Jack!" Caroline broke free from Hayes, running across the room to throw her arms around Jack Blackwell's waist. Jack turned, his weathered face lighting with relief and joy as he swept Caroline into a fierce embrace. "You made it," he murmured against her hair. "You brave, brave girl." Caroline clung to him, tears flowing freely now that safety had been reached. "I thought they might have caught you," she managed between sobs. "The soldiers. They tried," Jack acknowledged, his own voice rough with emotion. "But I had a promise to keep." Standing Elk stood in the corner of the office, his normally impassive face softened as he watched the reunion. "The daughter of Hargrove carried the evidence safely," he observed, "even when captured by Montgomery's men." "Montgomery is dead," Hayes informed them, placing the wooden horse carefully on his desk. "He drew on me when confronted with the evidence already in our possession. His men have been detained by citizens who support our cause." Jack nodded grimly. "And his brother, the governor. Federal marshals from Denver are riding to arrest him, even now." Jack nodded grimly. "And his brother, the governor. Federal marshals from Denver are riding to arrest him even now," Hayes replied. "Your testimony, combined with Lawrence's deathbed confession and the documents you both recovered, leave no room for doubt about his involvement in both Red Valley and the Hargrove murders." Jack's arms tightened around Caroline. "Then it's over. The truth will be known." The door to Hayes's Hayes's office burst open as a young reporter rushed in waving a telegram. Mr. Hayes, news from the Capitol. Governor Morrison has been arrested. Hayes snatched the telegram, scanning it quickly. They found him trying to flee, he announced, looking up with grim satisfaction. Attempting to board the eastbound train with 3 trunks of gold and government funds. When confronted with the marshal's warrant, he apparently drew a weapon. Is he? Jack left the question hanging, conscious of Caroline listening. Wounded, not killed, Hayes clarified. He'll stand trial alongside the others. The telegram says he was ranting about Blackwell and the Hargrove brat as they took him away. Said something about how he should have killed you both when he had the chance. Caroline looked up at Jack, her expression solemn but unafraid. He can't hurt anyone anymore, can he? No, brave girl, Jack assured her. Morrison's reign of corruption is finished. Tomorrow's headline, Hayes confirmed. Governor implicated in massacre and murder, Red Valley atrocity engineered for gold claims. The territorial legislature is already convening an emergency session to appoint an interim governor until elections can be held. Hayes replied, Your testimony, combined with Lawrence's deathbed confession and the documents you both recovered, leave no room for doubt about his involvement in both Red Valley and the Hargrove murders. Jack's arms tightened around Caroline. Then it's over. The truth will be known. Tomorrow's headline, Hayes confirmed. Governor implicated in massacre and murder, Red Valley atrocity engineered for gold claims. The territorial legislature is already convening an emergency session to appoint an interim governor until elections can be held. Caroline looked up at Jack, her tears subsiding. What happens now to us? Jack met her gaze, his expression softening. That depends partly on what you want, Caroline. I want to stay with you, she said without hesitation. You're the mountain guardian, my guardian. Jack glanced at Hayes. Is that even possible legally? Hayes smiled. Judge Hargrove named you as Caroline's guardian in his will should anything happen to him and his wife. He foresaw this possibility, it seems. Jack stared at Hayes in disbelief. He named me, but he'd never even met me. He knew you by reputation, Hayes explained, and by the testimony of those who survived Red Valley. He believed you were a good man who had been used by corrupt ones. Time has proven him correct. Caroline tugged at Jack's sleeve. Does this mean you'll be my papa now? Jack knelt to her level, his eyes serious as they met hers. I can never replace your father, Caroline, but I would be honored to be your guardian, to raise you as he would have wished. Can we go home? To your mountain? Jack smiled sadly. Not to Bear Mountain. Too many people know about that place now. But I think we can find another mountain, another valley, where we can build a new home. Together. Standing Elk stepped forward. My people would welcome you both in our new settlement north of here. The land is good, the hunting plentiful. And the daughter of Hargrove would grow up knowing both her worlds, the white man's and the Utes. Jack considered this offer with evident surprise. You would welcome me after what happened at Red Valley. You have helped bring justice to my people. Standing Elk replied simply. The past cannot be undone, but the future remains unwritten. Caroline looked between the two men, hope blossoming in her heart. Could we, Jack, live near Mr. Standing Elk's people? Jack's expression softened as he gazed at the child who had somehow become the center of his world. If that's what you want, brave girl. It is, Caroline confirmed, and I think Papa would approve. Hayes cleared his throat. Before you make any permanent decisions, you might consider another option. Judge Hargrove's position remains unfilled. The territorial court needs a man of principle, someone who understands justice and mercy in equal measure. Jack stared at Hayes in disbelief. "You can't mean me. I'm not a lawyer, Hayes. I'm a former cavalry officer with blood on his hands." "You're a man who crossed these mountains with a bullet in his shoulder to ensure the truth was told," Hayes countered. "You're a man who risked his life to protect a child and expose corruption that reached to the highest levels of government. That's exactly the kind of man the territorial court needs." Caroline tugged at Jack's sleeve again, her expression earnest. "Papa always said justice needs good people to defend it. Like you defended me." Jack looked from Caroline to Hayes to Standing Elk, clearly overwhelmed by the possibilities suddenly opening before him. 3 weeks ago, he had been a solitary man hiding from his past in a mountain cabin. Now, he was being offered guardianship of a child and a position of responsibility that could help shape the future of the territory. "I don't know," he said finally. "I need time to consider what's best for Caroline, for the territory, for all of us." "Take all the time you need," Hayes assured him. "The position will remain open until the right person is found. In the meantime, you and Caroline are welcome to stay in my home until you decide your next steps." As the conversation continued around her, Caroline leaned against Jack's side, a profound weariness overtaking her now that safety had been reached. The wooden horse rested on Hayes's desk, its carved eyes seeming to watch her with understanding. Papa had carved it with love hidden within it, the truth that would bring justice to his killers and to the people of Red Valley. "Tired?" Jack asked softly, noticing her drooping eyelids. Caroline nodded, fighting to stay awake. "Don't want to miss anything important." "Nothing more important than rest right now," Jack assured her, lifting her easily into his arms. "The decisions will wait until morning." As Jack carried her from the office, following Hayes toward a waiting carriage, Caroline rested her head against his shoulder, feeling truly safe for the first time since that terrible night in Leadville. "Jack," she murmured, sleep already claiming her. "Yes, brave girl. Papa was right about you. You are the mountain guardian." Jack's arms tightened around her, his voice rough with emotion as he replied, "And you, Caroline Hargrove, are the bravest person I've ever known." The carriage rattled through Denver's nighttime streets, carrying them toward Hayes's home and whatever future awaited. Behind them, the presses of the Denver Post churned relentlessly, preparing to deliver truth to a territory that had too long suffered under corruption and lies. Justice would come with the morning edition. For tonight, there was peace, there was safety, and there was the beginning of healing for wounds both old and new. In the quiet of the carriage, the mountain guardian and his brave girl found their way forward together between mountains and mercy. The end.